And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, him.
All right, attention to roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. We're back after Christmas. Here we go. Originally, we said we'd be back on Monday, but the stars aligned, so here we are. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 Eastern Time, and of course, for me, I'm on the Pacific Coast, and it's bright and early, brother. 5:05 in the morning, dark outside. The NYPD, the saga continues. Let's jump right into it. Merry Christmas to our friends, listeners on the podcast. We're getting close to New Year's. Holidays are in. I hope everybody's having a good time and getting some good grubbing. What do you say, brother?
Listen, the NYPD Corruption, baby. It never ends. This episode's titled Sex, Lies, and Overtime, because that's basically what we've been seeing. I hate to put on somebody's personal troubles, but, Tina Moore, New York Post, reported Jeffrey Madre was kicked out of his house over Christmas weekend. He's got a lot of big issues, man. What do you think? Like, where were his buddies? Like, how come Kaz couldn't put up a room at his house, or John Schell, his friend and mentor, John Schell? Where was Tariq Shepard? Where was Eric Adams? What about Gracie Mansion? Why is he out in Georgia?
That was the first thing that came to my mind. We just spoke about it offline, right? I'm saying, John, his so-called buddies, where are they? Kaz Daughtry, John Schell, Tariq Shepard. I mean, his monsters that he created. He's been in the backdrop. He's created them. He created the path for them. You don't hear anything. First of all, they're quiet on social media. You don't hear a peep. I always say there's no loyalty amongst thieves, and you see it right now. So for any cops out there who gave John and myself opposition, and you advocated for this administration, this administration backs the cops. They don't back each other. At the upper echelon, they have abandoned each other. You think they're going to back you? I mean, we've seen it time and time again. When are cops going to realize you're on your own? And that's why I used to say, John, I used to tell my cops, and some of my cops watch this. Actually, a lot of them do. Some watch it with their names, and some, unfortunately, work in units that they have to hide their name. Things are going to start changing. And I used to always tell them, you're a permanent guest in the upper echelon, and some of these commanders, they're temporary guests. They're stopping at the hotel. They come, they stir stuff up, they make a mess. And when it's time for you to have an investigation, they're gone. You're on your own. It's almost like when you go to your funeral. You die, in the end, you die by yourself. And it's the same thing with the NYPD.
No, nobody cares about you. No, absolutely nobody gives a crap. And we don't care about each other. It's funny, we posted there were like 10 transfers out of the chief of internal affairs office to squads. I think that's pretty soft landing, but it's, everybody's like, you get one side of the guys, that's normal. It's because there's a new chief. I'm like, nah, it's not normal. It's normal that that office gets moved around. There's inter-bureau transfers that will not be published publicly. Inter-bureau transfers that will go out throughout the Internal Affairs Bureau, where those people will be moved back into units with Internal Affairs. But if you're telling me that all 10 of those people asked to either go to a precinct or a numbered squad, you don't know what you're talking about, because that never happens. That is not a usual thing for the chief of Internal Affairs office to be pushed out of Internal Affairs after the chief leaves. Absolutely not normal. One of the guys I know, he was there. He came out with me, and he was there when I was there. I think we're going on, I don't even know how long ago that was now. It's almost 7 years ago. And he was a nice kid. He wasn't like, I don't think he was caught up in it. He was just the chief's lackey, And, but watching all the cops, screw those rats. I'm saying right now, screw any of the dirty cops. And I don't care if you're on patrol, if you're in a squad, if you're doing narcotics. I don't care what you are. If you're a dirty cop, screw you. And the people that are saying screw the rats, you're sitting here crying about the corruption. You're crying about where all the money's going in New York City. You're crying about all this thing. But you don't think that anybody should be investigating anybody? Out of your minds. If that's being a rat, call me one. I've been one my entire lifetime. because I don't like dirty people. I don't like liars. I don't like thieves.
These comments are flying in. Good morning, everybody. Right after Christmas. Paul's New York City beat 5896. Hope you're enjoying your retirement, brother. He says, the minute you leave the job, you are a nobody in the eyes of those still on. Even your friends treat you different. You're absolutely right. There's a complete separation from active to retirement. We do see active cops, overwhelming majority, not everybody, but the overwhelming theme of the NYPD is a complete separation from active retired, and they do treat retired people differently. And that has to make a change, because ultimately the goal of an active member is leading to a successful retirement. So when it comes to Jeffrey Madre and all these people making a quick exodus, they're even at the upper echelon and that they had and the control that they have over the job, immediately, once they cut ties with the job, they're being treated differently too. I mean, where are all these people that's supposed to advocate for them? I mean, they had this tight knit going on, and we don't see anything. I don't see, John Shell has been the most brazen when it comes to having pissing matches on social media and supposedly advocating for the rank and file. How come he's not fighting for Jeffrey Madre? How come we don't see social media tweets? How come we don't see John Shell on LinkedIn defending his mentor and his good friend? Not a peep. How come we don't see Cass Daughtry defending? Because right now, they're only worried about their own asses. They're trying to figure out how to save themselves. There's an old saying in the South, brother. Rattlesnakes don't commit suicide. But right now, they sure do.
Yeah, absolutely. Toka Plays said Shell packed up his office last night. Yeah, rumor is he's getting 3/4. I don't know how he was the chief of patrol if he was able to do the chief of patrol, now he's getting 3/4. That's another scam that needs to stop. All these chiefs getting out on 3/4. Absolute joke. When you got guys that actually get thrown downstairs, beat up, injured, and they're like, nah, you're fine. You only got 20% strength in your hand left. You're good. You could go back there. Your knee, you only got 20% movement in your knee. You're good. Oh, yeah, you messed up. Oh, no, you're good. We'll just give you your gun back. That whole thing needs to go, too. So, yeah, rumor is Shell should be out of here right after the new year. We'll see. I don't know. He said nobody's going to 233 Broadway. I just don't think it's accurate, right? Like, I just don't think that's accurate. I think a lot of people are headed for 233 Broadway. He was already down.
Play him a song. We can play him a song. That's all I want to do is play him a song, because John Shell said no one's going to 233 Broadway. I'm telling you, you might be going to 500 Pearl Street.
Yeah, and then Freed says also the IB transfers that came down yesterday were detectives that were in administration spot. They weren't based in 1PP. They were based in 1PP and weren't doing real investigation work. They work for the chief. I mean, I don't think that, if they were getting 800 hours of overtime, 1,000 hours of overtime, and they were doing administrative work, like what happened in the chief of department's office, first deputy commissioner's office, chief of patrol's office, chief of department's office, then I would have an issue with that. But I have an issue with everyone with this whole, anyone doing administrative work is not doing a job or is not working hard. Should cops be doing that? Again, there's numerous spots on this job that I'm going to say, take them out. Take all the uniforms out. You will see what will happen. Take all the uniforms out of it. You'll cry. I'm not saying all these spots, but there are certain spots. That's one of them. Chief of Internal Affairs Office. If you don't have people with integrity doing high-level reviews that understand this job, you're going to have a severe problem. And that's one of my biggest issues with internal affairs. And that was always my issue with them throughout my career is people go in there young and then they stay in there their whole career. So they don't keep up with what's changing. They don't know what the rules are, what rules of engagement are, arrest practices. And that's a problem for me. Again, I think everyone on this job should have to do a stint in internal affairs. I don't care if you're a cop, a detective, whatever. If you're in a certain rank for more than 5 years, I personally think you should be all up for being drafted. And that's how you keep the integrity of the department and you cycle these people out. Same way we had a guy that went through cop, sergeant, lieutenant, all in DCPI. We have cops that do the same thing in IAB all the way up to next thing you know, the guy's the chief of internal affairs. It's ridiculous. You don't, it's so, you're so narrowed in on your career that it's bad. But I'm not sitting here and hating on all administrative cops. Again, I think that we beat the shit out of each other. I'm like, yeah, throw those guys out. No, throw all the bums out that were dirty, that were covering up cases, that were covering up actual corrupt cases in IAB. That is the problem in IAB. And by throwing out these low-level sergeants and lieutenants, it shows me nothing. It shows absolutely nothing. If the chief of internal affairs had to leave, why the hell is his XO still there? Why the hell is the group of the CEO of Group 1 still there? Why is Group 1 still seated in those positions?
Well said. I agree with you. Absolutely. First of all, the leadership sets the example. It sets the tone and the theme for every bureau, organization, administration, whatever the case is. Iglesias, as the chief of internal affairs, we say it all the time, stinks from the head, and it stinks from the head from the entire department right now at the upper echelon, especially internal affairs is completely compromised, not trusted. The credibility of internal affairs is completely gone. We need a complete overhaul in internal affairs. Absolutely. If the chief goes, all his personnel must be removed, especially in Group 1, who's responsible for investigating the upper echelon, captain and above. Absolutely. No longer can it be trusted. And when we talk about leadership, if the leadership has removed, then everyone else follows suit. How could Iglesias be removed, but everyone that's working under him remain in place? It just doesn't make any sense. It's completely counterintuitive, and it's counterproductive. Tom, shout out to you. Merry Christmas, brother. $1.99. Start with coffee and donuts ready. Here we go. How many chief of department and chief patrol cops are going to the DC detail? Well, I tell you what, things are changing, obviously, right now. I think that we were under depression, at least for a period, just a short stint, to believe that Jessica Tish is actually cleaning the house. But it appears to be cleaning itself, and she appears to also continually be curbed by Eric Adams because some of these appointments just don't make sense. And I don't think that they're leaving because Jessica Tish is pushing them out. I think that this whole thing is starting to unravel, and they're starting to escape and run for the door. They're running like cowards, and it gives the impression that Jessica Tish really has her finger on it. I'm sure she does in a sense, but not to the point that we actually believe that she's taking this complete stance on corruption. Would they normally go into a detail? Sure, if Kaz Daughtry was running operations, but it looks like things are starting to change. And again, going back to that, John, I think that if it stinks from the head, everyone else is potentially infected and compromised. And if they're not, if they have nothing to do with it, still they're under. It's sorry, but you're a casualty. If you're a chief, cannot be trusted, and we're starting to remove leadership, and you're a cop in this particular bureau or in this group, you have to be removed. It is what it is.
I totally agree with you. We got New York City mayoral candidate Jim Walden in the chat. Jim, what's up, brother? I'll give you a call after. We're definitely going to set up a date. You can come on here and walk us through your platform, brother. Appreciate you being on here today. And that's my thing. Like, that's what I've been saying to everyone. I'm not saying that everybody in Group 1 is dirty or knew what was going on or covering up cases for the Chiefs. I'm not saying that at all. I don't know everybody in there. I might know some people. I don't know everyone in there. But regardless of the fact, whether you're a great guy and you knew nothing and you were completely isolated, you got to be gone, bro. I'm not saying you got to get kicked out of IB or you got to go somewhere, but you can't be in that spot. You cannot be in that spot right now. No, sorry. There is something really wrong here. And we're going to tell you about how really wrong something is. So we got a call from our case investigator the other day. We spoke to our legal counsel. He said, let me call. I said, all right, no problem. Then we got an email yesterday from Group 1, lieutenant in Group 1. So now for a year, you know that there was an active supervisor in the NYPD that threatened the lives of our children. He also threatened our lives, but whatever. That's rules for whatever, right? That's commonplace, right? We've been getting threatened by everybody for way longer than that, right? It's ever since we were born. So we're not worried about that. But like, you threaten the life of our children. You're an active police officer with a badge and a gun and authority. And you did it while the chief of patrol is coming after us, sending his goons, his paid goons on overtime, sending a captain, a numerous lieutenants, and the whole top tier of the CRT team, or whatever the hell they're called, threatening us, challenging us to fight, stupid things, releasing our personal info that's not public info on the internet, using their own names. Very weird for cops, right? Come on the internet using your own names, especially a captain bringing his whole crew, and absolutely nothing's done about it. We're never told the name of the person that threatened our kids' lives. While that's going on, Kaz Daughtry's accepting awards, talking smack about this podcast. You see it at the end of the podcast. We play it all the time, right? There's a couple of retired lieutenants, blah, 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 right? They live out of state, whatever the hell he says. As that's going on, the police commissioner's brother's business partner is sending threats to me, right? With Fat Joe on the group chat and all these people talking about like whatever. And I'm like, wait, time out. This is getting a little crazy. So the police department's using resources, putting fake investigations on us, going after anyone that's listening to this podcast, telling people not to listen in, smearing our names behind the scenes, calling around to all of our friends asking where we work and where we live so they could smear us and write letters about us to places, which they obviously are good at because they've been doing to sex crime victims for a long time now. So they've been doing all that shit. And then we get a call. We get an email yesterday from a lieutenant. And you know what he says? Oh, we're going to reinvestigate your case. And we're ready to give you the name now after a year. So don't worry, Eric. For a year, your kids' lives didn't matter. But now, all of a sudden, the kid that's been in NIB Group 1 the whole time, he's going to review the case. He's going to reinvestigate it and check out all the allegations. And now he's willing to tell you. What do you think about that?
We spoke about this yesterday. And you know what I say? F you. I can't say it here because it's YouTube right now, and I don't want to be kicked off, but F you. We used to say EAD. So if anybody was a cop and you actually know what that means, you can put it in the chat. You know what I say when I say EAD. Rich Rod, shout out to you. Coffee and donuts, $20. Here we go. Merry Christmas, brother. Says, good morning, John, Eric, and everyone on the channel. Thank you, brother. Shout out to you. Early in the morning. First of all, on one hand, I'm completely perturbed. But at the second hand, on the other aspect of it, I'm actually at the point where, you know what? This solidifies and validates every claim that John and I have made. We've been called radicals. Plenty of people I know, even friends, that, you guys are crazy. You believe that some cop, that someone behind an NYPD badge is actually threatening you? Free. You hit it on the money. That's right. That's exactly what EAD means. But you hit it on the money. And we said it from the beginning that our communication with Internal Affairs would be by email because we don't trust the integrity of this investigation. And we believe that the investigation would be narrowed in a particular way to smear and slander John and myself and make us out to be some type of radicals or emotionally disturbed persons as a way to maneuver, manipulate, and close out this case. Because our complaints included a vast amount of the upper echelon, all the way up to Eric Adams. And sure enough, we were stonewalled, and we would not provide the information. Yes, a member of the service behind the fake moniker, all cops are woke, threatening our families, calling me 3 nights in a row, 3 o'clock in the morning, texting me, calling my phone, the most insane threats to our kids, John's kids, my kids, to our families, and we were completely stonewalled by Sergeant Richard Galvez, in Internal Affairs of Group 1, who would not provide the information to us, and we were told that he could not provide the information because this was given during a GO under duress. Duress? How about the fact that we're under duress, that there's someone out there that doesn't want to provide you don't want to provide the information to us, and you're telling us that we should feel more safe now, and yet there's someone who's unhinged, should not run around with a badge and a gun, and now they're running around, and they're pissed that they are no longer a member of the service with the NYPD. And we were even further stonewalled because we were told we should go to the sheriff's department in Florida to make a claim against all cops are woke because the NYPD Internal Affairs refused to take a report, refused to press any charges, and refused to provide us the information. And now all of a sudden, after I posted a tweet to the PC saying that obviously we want our case reinvestigated, it's completely compromised, and within a couple of days, well, actually, after our podcast last week, after a Mercy podcast, we were contacted by Sergeant Richard Galvez the following morning within less than 12 hours saying that he wants to talk about the case. And then within a couple of days after that, here we are right after Christmas, that the case is being reinvestigated. And all of a sudden, magically, John, now our lives matter. And I said it to Richard Galvez on the phone. I said, what do you want, someone to blow the back of our heads because we don't have no idea who it is? And we were completely stonewalled for an entire year. We were actually told, think about that, from the NYPD. Go to the Sheriff's Department in Florida and let them open up a case to get the information. You have the information. This is your cop. John, I'm perturbed. How about you?
I was infuriated when I read the email. Absolutely infuriated. I'm like, you disregard our lives for over a year. You treat us like we're emotionally disturbed people when you know what we're saying is accurate. We gave you irrefutable evidence. The upper echelons criminal associating. The upper echelon sent their top team, the criminal response team, to attack this podcast, to try to intimidate us, try to silence us. You know, they're telling people not to watch this podcast, and they got people going through my social media, Eric's social media, Sal's social media, who's on the chat. You know all of this. You know the misuse of police funds. Over and like, what did we say? Like, what were we saying originally? Like, we were saying these people are getting overtime to watch this podcast. They're getting overtime to come on here and talk smack. They're getting overtime to go make threats on our social media, reveal unlawful information about us. We know that our names were ran hundreds of times in the New York City Police Department computers for no reason whatsoever. And then to cover that up, you drop a BS criminal investigation accusing us of buying information. I never gave $1 to anybody for any information. Never once. I never asked anybody I know for one piece of information. And 99.9% of the things, I mean, you know what? Screw that. 100% of the things is public information that we talk about. And most of the time, we're not revealing anything that nobody else doesn't know. It's all public information. We're talking about newspaper articles and giving our opinion on it. Sorry that you guys are such corrupt, dumb, incompetent losers that all of our predictions have been 100% accurate. Sorry. You know, Edgar Diaz says it here. As Serpico once said, the good cop has to be frightened of the bad cop. Instead, the bad cop being frightened of the good cop. I think it's the other way around, but whatever. But the bottom line is this. The bottom line is this. You have corrupt guys in charge of the New York City Police Department. They knew exactly what was going on. And now the same people that were sitting in Group 1, you basically just admitted to us that our investigations has been stonewalled for a year. And now the same people that were sitting in there are still investigating. I don't trust Group 1 at all at this point. I think that obviously our case has been compromised. I'm speaking with my legal representative first before we contact you. Me and Eric are speaking with our legal representatives before we contact you because honestly, I don't trust you. And how could you blame us at this point? I haven't trusted you I knew you couldn't get it done. And in a conversation that we had, I said to the sergeant, I said, I know you're in a bad spot. I know you're in a bad spot. I know you can't properly investigate this case. I understand that. I'm just asking you to see the allegations out and through and leave them as what they are. Leave what we put in there. We labeled the whole thing out. Who the subjects were. It was the chief of internal affairs. It was Ed Caban. It was John Shell. It was Kaz Daughtry. Tariq, you actually weren't in it, shockingly. But it was a lot of different people. It was the first deputy commissioner, right? Because she had her people, or at least her people were calling around asking where I work and where I live. And we labeled all these things out, and we gave irrefutable evidence of all of it. And nothing's been done for a year. And some of it was nonsense. Some of it was nonsense, and we were never, ever, ever, ever even going to tell anybody about it. It would have never went anywhere until they threatened our kids. Until you threatened our kids, until you started sending underworld figures. You're the New York City Police Department, and you're sending underworld figures after us because we're giving our opinion on a podcast, and you're threatening the lives of our children. And you're supposed to be cops? No, that's when I said, and I'll go back to the video that day. I said, we're coming for your badges and your guns. We're coming for your badges and your guns. And I don't feel bad. They honestly, I like I said, this hasn't gone far enough. The people that have been allowed to retire, I'm not even happy with that. I'm not happy with that at all. And then when I look at those 10 transfers out of internal affairs, those aren't the people. I don't care that they're Iglesias' people. I don't care. They're lackeys. I don't want them. I want the CO Group 1 that knew exactly what was going on. I want all of Group 1 who knew exactly what was going on. I want the people that were investigating our case because, like I said, if they could do it to me and Eric, if they could do it to us, they have, what the hell are they covering up that's going on out there? What else is under the surface of this? This is just the tip of the iceberg. This whole overtime sex corruption thing, this is the tip. This is nothing. This is nothing. Nothing. Oh, just shakedowns, using police resources. Now some overtimes for sex. This is nothing. The stuff that's going to come out is going to make your head spin.
I'm glad you say that because that's what I've been telling people. Right now, this is getting a lot of attention, the sex stuff, because it's sexy, right? People are attracted to this story. People like to talk about this. That's the bottom line. It creates a lot of drama. But the reality is, this is nothing compared to what's going on. This is just one aspect. This is one window. If you were looking at a building right now of apartments, this is just one window you're looking at. We haven't even gotten to the rooftop yet. And I will say this, John. I think that was very nice of you to say, kind of generous towards Sergeant Richard Galvez. I hold Sergeant Richard Galvez responsible also. I don't show him any sympathy or any mercy in this case because he wasn't just the next guy up as the investigator taking this case. He was handpicked. He was selected. There's no coincidence, right? I don't believe in coincidences in life. That Sergeant Richard Galvez is 7.5 alumni, and who also worked in the 7.5 at the same time he did? Kaz Daughtry, who's also
Shell, Madre.
I was going to get to that, right? So there's numerous people, including the upper echelon, that are part of our complaint that worked with Sergeant Richard Galvez. So he was handpicked. There's no doubt in my mind. It just happens to be Richard Galvez that's up. So Richard Galvez sold his soul and gave up his integrity and compromised himself. The bottom line is, John, you and I would not be taking that case if we were in internal affairs because we would say, I have a problem with this. This is unethical. Right now, I have the information of the member of service that threaten the lives of these particular 2 retired members of service, and I'm not going to release that information. Completely stonewalled us. If you were told to stonewall us by the upper echelon, well, shame on you because you were supposed to report misconduct and corruption yourself. So I hold him responsible and liable because at the end of the day, one day we're all going to a box with no money, and all we go and one day in our lives we have to look up and ask ourselves who we are and what we stand by. And you know what? I hold him responsible also. VSS Ventura's, shout out to you, $20 coffee and donuts. Never let these losers win the day. That's right. I feel like we're winning. They preach the moral high ground and yet utilize violence at a moment's notice. They're all Peter Union, Sam, Ida, Ed, Sams. Do not fold either of you. No, absolutely, we're not folded, right? I'm completely perturbed because we knew that for an entire year that our investigation was stonewalled. John and I couldn't have been more articulate in the initial onset of our complaint. It was laid out line by line with a timeline. And yet, immediately after the intake that our case was taken by Sergeant Richard Galvez, we would ask silly questions, questions that were completely laid out, and not completely coinciding with the complaint. And we had to actually, again, John and I said, your question applies to number one. Let's explain it to you. And we actually had to lay it out again numerous times because they were trying to be completely evasive, trying to stonewall this complaint from the beginning. So that's our point to this, is that John and myself are in retirement, so we understand the silver linings of the police department. We work for the police department, so we're not timid. We don't have any fear by this case, and we could actually challenge it. But yet, what happens to someone who's a civilian, who has no understanding of the police department? They must be completely timid. They must be meat to the case, and they must be completely railroaded within a short period of time. I mean, this is a year this case is going on, and look how they treated us. So imagine how they treat the general population. This is a theme that's been going on for years. Just this administration took it to another level. I'm not giving a pass. Obviously, this is a theme that they learned it from, a complete cover-up when it comes to internal affairs. And if you make a complaint, we've seen it through sexual allegations. We've seen it just people making a complaint. We've seen it with Adrian Schoolcraft. You will be made out to be a complete radical, and you will be smeared. And it's my argument to believe now, if John and myself were still in New York City, there would probably be, I would assume there may be an effort to try to make us out to be emotionally disturbed persons and remove us to the hospital, because that's a theme of the police department. We've seen it time and time again.
No, it's so listen, anything short of not a full removal of all of the people in charge of investigating the upper echelon in internal affairs, and I'm talking solely about Group 1 and the CO and the XO of internal affairs, as well as the CO of criminal investigations, CO of administration. All of the top tier executive levels and Group 1 need to go. They knew these allegations. They knew all of them. And where were they? And on top of that, not only does that need to happen, what also needs to happen is, since Eric Adams came in power, every single allegation against anyone in this administration, top tier, mayoral appointment, Kaz Daughtry, Tanya Kinsella, Tariq Shepard, Jeff Madre, John Schell, whoever, Eric Adams, whatever came in needs to be reinvestigated. Need to look at what was sent out, what got called in to IAB or sent, and the chief of IAB said, oh, close it out, information and intelligence. You need to take a very good look at those. Were there sex trafficking allegations that came in, that they were hanging out in places where drugs were being sold, with sex trafficking going on? Was that happening? And if so, who made the determination when those logs came in to send that down to information and intelligence? Obviously, it would be the CO of internal affairs. Now you have criminality, you have corruption, you have covered up criminality, you have serious high-level stuff that came in there and people knew about it, right? And then you had other cases that got taken and were being stonewalled. Oh, yeah, don't worry about it. We're just going to do this with the allegation. We're just going to do this with the subject. We're just going to do that with the subject because, hey, guess what? We're in charge. Nobody's ever going to look at this anyway. So anything short of that, and I'm saying you didn't weed out any corruption, and the NYPD remains systemically corrupt on the Jessica Tish. It's all or nothing. This whole smoke and mirrors game, I'm done with it. I'm totally done with it. You know, the news, it's like they want to like beat around the bush. None of this would be possible if not for Eric Adams. None of it. Absolutely none of it. And then today, what does he say today? I want everyone to watch the overtime in your agencies. Like, are you serious? And the news actually reports that. Oh, Eric Adams is calling for overtime to be scrutinized. Overtime has been scrutinized for the last 30 years. The only time we've had a problem with overtime is under this man's administration, because he opened up the floodgates. He put corrupt, low integrity individuals who are highly incompetent in charge of all his major agencies. It's the only time it's been there. So Eric Adams calling for anything is an absolute joke at this point. It's an absolute joke.
I normally don't entertain Juju, but this one is hilarious. Juju, podcast over once he leaves. He's talking about Eric Adams. Enjoy while it lasts. Brother, I know you've wanted us to go away for a long time, and we kept you entertained, but we're not going anywhere. We're only building, getting bigger and stronger. But we appreciate the opposition. Keep trying.
Oh, absolute joke, dude. And then, so there was a lot of stuff that came out. Sal Greco put a lot of stuff out on X yesterday. Check it out. But I think the most glaring stuff that he put out is you have rookies, legitimate rookies, 7 years on, 3 years on, 4 years on. All the people that were saying me and Eric contributed nothing to the department when we spent 5 times the amount of our careers out on the street. Eric was out on the street his whole career, but 5 times the amount, even me. I went inside my last 5 years. I was still out on the street a decade past these people. They have zero experience. Rookies inside in the chief of department's office, detective shield with not even 30 arrests. I'm gonna have 30 arrests and you're a detective? How does that work? How does that actually work? That you have 0 arrests, you're a detective. And on top of that, they're making 800 hours a year. So they're making upwards of 250, a detective with 7 years on. Numerous people, chief of department's office, patrol services bureau, and these losers. And then by these losers, I'm talking about John Shaw, Madre, and Kaz. Oh, those guys didn't do nothing. If you're saying that me and Eric didn't do nothing, you just not only discredited your whole career, you definitely discredited the mayor's career because that dude was a joke. That dude was nobody. That dude couldn't shine a regular patrol bum shoes that only has 20 arrests after 20 years of service because they blew Eric Adams out of the water. They blew Eric Adams out of the water. Much more highly effective. Definitely better bang for the buck for a guy at the patrol's entire career, and that's 20 arrests and 20-year career. Blow Eric Adams out of the water. But what about these kids that you gave a detective shield to that don't even know how to testify in court, that don't even know how to run a sector car, and they're getting 800 hours a year, 1,000 hours a year, sitting in an office? They're not out there partaking in public safety. What does that say? You just shit on your whole staff.
Sal and I were reporting on one of the cops up on the 14th floor of One Police Plaza. And so credible source said that this particular cop was actually seen removing items from Jeffrey Madre's office. Now, could it be his belongings because he's leaving? Yes. But unfortunately, there's no trust and credibility, so there's every reason to believe that possibly they're actually removing evidence from the office in regards to his particular case right now. The point is, it doesn't matter. There's no trust and there's no credibility. But one thing to reflect on is this particular cop, who's a detective, we actually highlighted, made over $250,000 last year as a third grade detective. So I want you to think about that. Now, I retired 2 years ago, and I worked a lot of overtime. I probably did about 650, maybe 660 hours for the year, which I thought was a lot. I mean, working as a special operations lieutenant in the South Bronx, it was exhausting going back and forth home, commuting. It's a lot of work. And I made less than 250. And I was a special assignment lieutenant. So my question is, how does a detective with more than half of the amount of time less than I have, not even a decade on the job yet, and this is 2 years ago, the salaries haven't changed that much. How does that detective make over $250,000 not making any arrests because they're in an administrative role at One Police Plaza? And then this particular cop, and there's many others, we're going through the list here, who made over $250,000. I was a special operations lieutenant. How did they do it? So this is not just about sex. It's going on right now at One Police Plaza. There's other aspects going on. This is just the tip of the spear. This is just one window to look in right now. And right now, if this was private industry, there would be heads rolling right now. Numerous people would be fired right now. Even if you had no idea what was going on, but you missed it and you cost that money, that business, millions of dollars, you would be fired. So right now, here we are. We're looking at Tanya Kinsella. She's the first deputy commissioner. She testified to the New York City Council hearing. And John and I highlighted that she actually makes a statement that it's her responsibility, that they conduct biweekly meetings, that they actually implemented numerous layers to weed out potential excessive, unnecessary, and the abuse of overtime. So the question is, did she know? And she's grossly incompetent? Or did she not know? She's just so incompetent, has no idea what's going on. or because she's grossly incompetent and knew what was going on and she turned a blind eye because it involves nepotism and her cohorts. So either way, she's completely responsible. Epic fail. She should be fired and removed immediately. Because if this was private industry, and ultimately this has cost the taxpayer millions, think about it. Let's take, rhetorically speaking, 5 members of the service right now, one working at one police plaza that had an excess of $200,000 in overtime apiece, and it's questionable. Potential theft, that's over $1 million. She has cost the city millions. She failed. You had one job, epic fail.
Absolute epic fail. Absolutely. Yeah, so we played that video last week for you where she testified saying it's her overtime's her responsibility. She does bi-weekly reports. And it's just weird. The bi-weekly reports didn't include the people in her office and Shell's office and Kaz's office and Madre's office. Oh, very convenient. So my thing is that it doesn't matter if she's either grossly incompetent or she's involved. But either way, it doesn't matter. It's blatant corruption. Blatant corruption happened, and it's a blatant failure on her part, and that's it. You sat there while Ed Caban and Jeffrey Madre twiddled their thumbs. You should go the way of Jeff Madre and Ed Caban. And the fact that she isn't out, and the fact that John Shell isn't out, and the fact that Kaz Daughtry isn't out, and Tariq Shepard still is a 2-star chief in the NYPD, shows me that Eric Adams is still in charge of the NYPD. And the great white hope, Jessica Tish, isn't going to do what she thinks she's going to do. She's going to let Eric Adams run the police department. And there's a guy on here saying that we don't we talk about nepotism, but we're not calling out Tish. We did an episode on that, dude. Watch it. We said exactly what happened and why she's appointed. So I don't know what you're talking about. But this right here, there's going to be another video of Kinsella that I bring in. But this right here is not the video of Kinsella from last week that we played for you. This is Chief Jeffrey Madre. This is Chief Jeffrey Madre. And look what he says. He's not even prompted to speak at this. This is an overtime budget hearing. This is on March 20th, 2024. It's all about overtime. It's all about a budget, like what the new budget is for the year. Listen to what Jeffrey Madre says. He's unprompted to do this, by the way. Completely unprompted. He just butts in to say this. Here's Chief Jeffrey Madre. Listen to him.
Madam Chair, I want you to be assured that we really.
This is Mr. Chair.
No. I'm answering your question.
I'm not the chair, though.
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. Excuse me. I want you to be assured that we do put our best efforts in to reduce overtime. Our biggest challenge with reducing overtime is the unforeseen and unknown. A lot of times where we have our plans and overtime is mapped out, situations arise, protests, terrible shootings where we believe there's high retaliation, and this requires us to hold over additional resources, additional personnel. So this is really a big factor in why our overtime continues to fluctuate, where we don't meet, our projections because we have these unforeseen circumstances, and it's all around public safety, around keeping the community safe, keeping traffic moving, and keeping young people safe.
Thank you, Chief.
What do you think about what Chief Jeffrey Madre had to say about overtime?
You're looking at 3 bums right now. That attorney also. But you're looking at 3 bums right now. Ed Caban, who resigned. John Shell, who's about to be out the door real soon. The fact that he's going to get 3 quarters is absolutely ridiculous. First of all, that has to stop. It's so egregious. That's a corruption scale on its own. I mean, where he's claiming a potential injury from 10 years ago and he's been out there working, it's no problem, but he'll get a disability pension on the way out. But when it comes to Jeffrey Madre, he is the wolf in sheep's clothing. He smiles at the camera. He plays all nice with his poise and distinction. But meanwhile, he's the one that created all these monsters. And meanwhile, he's blatantly lying. Right now, he's lying in his testimony about overtime because he's behind it being completely excessive and abusive. Because as of March at this time when he testified, the abuse had already started because the abuse was years prior, just unnoticed and undetected. But thank God to John, myself, Sal Greco, Marlon Bethel, people, our friends and listeners that actually point out the truth. This is just a blatant lie. And everyone around him, knows what's going on. They may not know exactly what's going on, the details of sex or what benefits are involved, but they know there's abuse of overtime. And if they don't, this is an epic fail for an entire year, that the entire upper echelon failed to do their job, and we've allowed them to be in place. And Marlon said it earlier on this chat. I see some great communication between Marlon and the other people on this chat, that if you just wait, this is not going to clean itself. There has to be people that actually put their finger on it.
Yeah, Jeffrey Madre says, what does he say? He said, you have to know, Madam Chair or Madam Speaker, you have to know that every piece of overtime is being used to ensure public safety, protest, traffic safety. He left out on-duty booty, right? He left out the main piece of overtime, the on-duty booty, which is what he was concerned about. And I mean, this is glaring. These is exactly who these people are. But this is why Jeff succeeded in his career up to this point. Again, literally, I was at holiday parties all weekend. I was at Christmas parties all weekend. Literally, no one shocked by this. Nobody. Everybody I was with worked for Madre, liked Madre, said he's a nice guy. They said he's not focused on police work, which we all said. He never cared about the job. He was always level-headed because he really didn't give two shits about the job. He was solely focused on women. Everyone says that. Everyone you encounter, they all say the same thing. He was a nice boss. He didn't bother you. He wasn't looking to get you. He wasn't looking to do all this stuff. And he's a good public speaker, and he knew how to say the right things. But it came back to get him. And it's honestly, it's disturbing to watch. It's disturbing to watch. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been stolen out of New York City taxpayers by way of the corrupt actions of this department. Not just in overtime. There are so many. 500 people were brought in and shown my Instagram and IB. What does that cost on taxpayers? It's millions. They've spent millions and millions of dollars investigating on social media handles in this podcast. Millions. For what? Because your butt hurt? Because there was a meme about you that was true? It's an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace.
John, in the beginning, when we started to receive attacks on social media, I mean, you and I are both very tolerant. We laughed about it. We laughed like it was stupid. They would call us out. They wanted to have fights with us, which I think is laughable. I mean, they wouldn't even last a second. I mean, what a joke. Anyway, who cares? We were pretty tolerant. We didn't care. We laughed at it. It was stupid. But at the same token, we said, "Wow, look at the effort." I mean, we have the critical response team, which I call the citywide response team, which I call the criminal response team, spend their entire tour. Obviously, there's no oversight, no leadership, because the leadership was actually taking part with it. The entire tour on social media trying to suppress this First Amendment speech of our podcast because they felt it was a reflection of themselves. But they spent their entire tour, and this is not just one time. This went on several times where they spent their entire tour. We're talking about millions of dollars where police officers are supposed to be valued and work in the street. But Jeffrey Madre just all out lies. That's the theme of this administration. Just think about that. He's the chief of department, so he sets the example that stems through the upper echelon. John Schell says that Jeffrey Madre is his mentor. So as a mentor, you learn to lie. You learn to gaslight. That's the theme. Jeffrey Madre just all out lies. That's why I say he is the wolf in sheep's clothing, because he does a great job of putting on a smile. The community likes him. He's kind of charismatic in a sense. He seems to have more poise. He seems on the surface, the appearance, to have more reason. But behind all that is the wolf, because he created these monsters, Kaz Daughtry, Tariq Shepard, and John Schell, to do his bidding. And then he gets to look like the nice guy. But meanwhile, he knows that the overtime is being abused, whether it's for sex or whatever benefit. The bottom line is he's aware that it's being abused, misused, and he's treating the police department as if it's his department and utilizing the money in the way that he sees fit and sees it as his money. That's why it's an epic fail, because no one around him ever spoke up. No one. I mean, if they claim that they have these bi-weekly meetings, and this is going back in March, it's impossible that nobody saw these atrocities that are going on with overtime. That's why I say back to every chief, 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. They're all compromised. You have commanding officers in precincts putting pressure on their underlings to produce 49s. So our active retired members at NYPD know what a 49 is. If you're a civilian or from an outside law enforcement, I'm sure you have your own term, but a 49 is a report that goes through the department and gives the chief department awareness of what's going on, something that may be newsworthy. And commanding officers are pressured to have their underlings write a 49 report to explain why a police officer received an extra hour of overtime because they're face-to-face relief for a shooting post. And what a shooting post is, if there was a shooting at a particular location where we have a police car sit there for several days, monitor that particular area to suppress any potential further shootings. And if there's an hour late, those police officers are receiving overtime. And there is a severe amount of pressure on the commanding officers, the integrity control officers, which are lieutenants in these precincts to suppress this overtime. And meanwhile, we have administrative roles and administrative personnel at one police plaza making in excess of $200,000 overtime. Now, John, I agree with you. There are administrative roles that are very purposeful, but we see an excessive amount of administrative positions with this particular administration, and they're making overtime that cannot be accounted for, even if they were at work the entire time and managed to physically be there to get this overtime. There's not enough performance to actually reflect on the amount of overtime conducted. It's just impossible.
No, yeah, 100%. Somebody on Twitter sent me a message. They said it would be exceedingly bad blow to morale for the PC to call for a top-to-bottom overtime review. This was abuse concentrated in a few executive office. If everyone gets punished for the actions of a few entitled tools, it will be devastating. I don't think she will. So first off, the overtime review is already happening, and it's happening specifically in those offices. So the morale that's only going to be affected by that is the morale in those offices. That is going to actually improve morale amongst the rank and file throughout the New York City Police Department, because they're the people on the street that have been being scrutinized from top to bottom forever, every week, every month, every day, right? They've been getting scrutinized. So let the people who scrutinized them now be scrutinized. But I actually didn't call for an overtime review. I'm calling for a corruption review. There honestly should be there should be another commission. If this city wants to do right, there should be a commission had. We had the Mullen Commission, I believe it was in 92, the last commission that was held. There needs to be a full, thorough review of the allegations made against the upper echelon of the New York City Police Department and what the New York City Police Department did with those allegations, and did they forward them to the proper channels? Did they forward those allegations to DOI? Did they follow the one? Did they push the ones to the FBI that had to go to the FBI, and so on and so forth? Or did they close them all out in-house? And the same should be done for DOI. The same exact investigation, because if there was any allegation that left the Internal Affairs Bureau and went to DOI, what happened to those investigations? Is this a shock to DOI that this came out? Oh, it's a shock to you. Oh, okay. That means you were improperly closing out allegations too. You were part of the corruption. So that's what I'm saying. Screw the overtime review. It already happened. Do it in those little offices. I'm talking about a full top to bottom corruption review. And, there's a lot of people on here, and there's a lot of people throughout the days. Epps is no victim. Epps isn't this. Epps isn't that. I agree with you, but I don't care. She was allowed to do it. She should have never been in the position where she was able to do it, ever. And everyone knew what was going on. Every single person knew what was going on. Is she wrong for doing that? Yeah, she's wrong. She's messed up. But she's not as messed up as the people in charge who allowed this and pushed this. And it wasn't just Epps. It was a lot of other people. Millions and millions of dollars in overtime were stolen amongst these executives' office, these appointed managers' offices. Millions and millions of dollars. And from what I'm hearing, millions and millions of dollars in federal funds.
Right, because apparently they use the FEMA code to actually use this overtime. So the police department is famous for that, for utilizing particular budgets that are meant for a specific purpose and utilized in a different manner. And this has been the theme of the police department for years, but this is just far more egregious, where federal funds were utilized to abuse this particular overtime. So I think when it comes to EPS, and potentially there's other females involved in this, I don't think they're victims either. But I agree with you. The leadership, the enterprise, this criminal enterprise that's going on with the upper echelon, create a pathway for this. They enabled them to do this. They didn't just get the overtime on their own. They didn't sign off their own slips. They engage, and yes, it's a two-way street in the manner that they got the overtime. I don't see them as victims either. But I also blame the leadership even further because they actually created this environment. And I also blame Tiny Kinsella and other members of the police department that were in charge of oversight to actually have a check and balance when it came to overtime, and one that either grossly incompetent, had no idea what's going on, which is a huge problem, or number two, which I think ultimately what happened is they were aware and they just turned a blind eye. Now, I'm not saying they're aware of actually what's going on, the benefit, but they're aware that overtime is being abused, and I'm sure that there were inklings and ideas of what potentially is going on, and they turned a blind eye. That's cowardice. They're all compromised and infected. But this is just one window. This excessive overtime, that's what this theme is not about. We're not combating just overtime. We're combating overall corruption. The entire upper echelon has created a criminal enterprise where they have treated the police department not as New York City's New York Police Department. It's their police department. That's why it's so fitting that we have this iconic shield patch that we created here, the party department, because that's what's reflective. This is no longer New York City Police Department. It's their department. It's their party department. We have numerous members of the upper echelon that have enjoyed the fruits of traveling with this police department, Qatar and other locations. This department has controlled the narrative and gaslit the public when it comes to crime. They've controlled the narrative. John Shell, along with Kaz Daughtry, have had pissing matches with journalists and trying to suppress this podcast, trying to suppress any First Amendment speech that is in opposition or critical to this upper echelon. What else is going on behind these doors? And if you think it's just about sex and overtime, that's just one window. That's just one small aspect. There are so many things going on. It's questionable also when it comes to private contracts. Ed Caban, while he was commissioner, his brother had his own security detail. Think about the cost that plays out. That taxpayer dollars, that's corruption right there. There are so many different aspects. We have allegations of a potential racketeering scheme. We have allegations that the fraternal organizations are taking part in this quid pro benefit of getting promotions. So there's a lot of things in question. Promotions, overtime, issues with sex. It's one aspect there after another. What's going on with EPS is just a small piece of it. It's not isolated to that. If it was just Jeffrey Madre and EPS, it was isolated to that, you could cut out that problem and the police department continue to function. But it's a complete criminal enterprise, and we're talking about all-out corruption. We're combating corruption. And it's my opinion, based on the evidence, based on the amount of time that this has been happening and how egregious and publicized this particular administration has been with the NYPD, that the entire staff of chiefs, the rank of anyone who has a star on their shoulder right now, is compromised. And if you have a star on your shoulder, you probably are hating what I'm saying, how dare you say that? But ask yourself, did you see something? We always say, if you see something, say something. Did you see something? Was your bureau or your borough pressured for overtime, and yet there's members of the service receiving more than 200,000 overtime, and yet you were pressured about some detective that got an extra 4 hours working a particular case, maybe a homicide case, maybe a robbery case, and one of your detectives was pressured and you had to answer for it, and this egregious overtime is going on? Ask yourself that.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. And Patrick Donahue brings up a great point. Today is 12/27/24, and former chief of department running his time is not modified or suspended, despite the heinous allegations of trading overtime for deviant sexual allegations. Right? What would happen? They went back and they suspended Tabitha Foster. Excuse me, They went back and they suspended Quatisha Epps, right? Why is he not suspended? Right? But that's a great point. And that's what we see time and time again. None of it makes sense. Absolutely none of it. So this is Tanya Kinsella. This is that same hearing. This is a different clip. It's a little bit after she testifies. It's after the Madre testimony. Overtime gets brought up again. They're still talking about overtime. Let's tune in to what Tanya Kinsella says here about the overtime.
Okay. What other categories has NYPD seen reductions in overtime spending, and what actions were taken to bring about these decreases?
So, Seth, I'll turn it over to Seth in a second to give you the actual numbers. But when we saw that there was an increase of overtime misuse, like I said earlier, that we conduct bi-weekly meetings with each bureau head, and they have to discuss line by line exactly why they're up in a particular category and what they're going to do about it. And if it's so egregious, that bureau or unit have to come to my office and answer to myself or the police commissioner as to what and why the overtime is increased. And as far as the numbers, that could give you that.
What do you think about that, Eric?
Loser. That's an epic fail right there. You tell me they have to go to your office, that you go line by line. That's an outright lie. Because if you're telling the truth that you went line by line, you just admitted that you're aware of what was happening and you turned a blind eye. No longer could she say, honestly, at this point, if she's actually questions about this, and if there's ever a court case and she gets deposed, she cannot say, I didn't know. I had no idea what's going on. You just testified to the city council that you have bi-weekly meetings. She doubled down and said that they've added additional layers, and they actually go line by line to make sure there's no mistakes. So that means that you turned a blind eye. That's an admission of guilt right there.
She absolutely. I mean, this is sworn testimony here. So she's saying she knows when overtime is egregious, and she calls the bureau heads there. So they're looking at everything. She admits it right there. She told you bi-weekly meetings. So they were just looking at, oh, not these people. Oh, let's just hammer down on these detectives that are actually out there arresting people. Let's just hammer down with the guys on patrol that are out there responding to 911 calls, and we're ordering them to work every day they're off. Let's just look at those and bother those people. Let's scrutinize that, but let's not look at ourselves. Line by line. And the other thing that this sworn testimony reveals is that she absolutely has no idea about her job, because she pawns everything on Seth Severino. Literally everything. Seth's a hardworking guy, works in Deputy Commissioner Management, budget, civilian. He's like an auditor. He breaks things down. He's a numbers guy. But everything just goes to Seth. Oh, Seth will tell you the numbers. Seth has all the information. Seth knows everything. I didn't bother studying for any of this. I don't know anything that's actually happening. I just know people have to come to my office and explain to me about overtime, while there is a huge corruption scandal involving millions and millions and millions of dollars, probably in the tens of millions of dollars, New York City taxpayer money being funneled and misused for sexual favors, to return political favors, all of this stuff. And on top of the overtime, and a lot of people are talking about it here, you're 100% right. It's the detective promotions. It's the promotions to grade. It's the promotions for sergeants. It's the promotion for lieutenants. Because we've seen in the last 3 years under this administration, losers, absolute losers on this job. The worst, the dumbest, the most incompetent people get promoted and get rewarded. And the people with the lowest integrity, by the way, get promoted. So it's not just, when we're talking about the overtime and the misuse of police resources, we have to think about all the ways the money was misused. It was misused to go against critics. It was misused to promote their friends. It was misused to promote people for favors. It was misused to do favors for people. Oh, you want to go out to the Hamptons? We'll fly you out. Oh, you want to take a boat ride out to the Hamptons? We'll drive you out. Political favors, political clout, and to build themselves up for their careers in retirement. Complete misuse of taxpayer funds. This whole administration is still currently being run, by the way, because Jessica, you have not done anything to clean this up, in my opinion. Nothing. This is just a fallout from what needed to happen. You've done the least amount to clean this up as possible, as humanly possible. You've done to just make it appear that way. But this whole department was and still currently is being run by people who are misusing the term public safety for their own personal gain. This has nothing to do with providing public safety to New York City residents. None of these people.
Well, in response to that tweet that you got earlier through messaging, that Jessica Tish is a nepotism hire, absolutely. Jessica Tish is another nepotism appointment. This entire administration has been appointments by nepotism, and nepotism equates to corruption. And the nepotism for Jessica Tish is being part of the 43rd richest family in the entire country. Being part of the 43rd richest family, that nepotism appointment is a benefit for Eric Adams. So what is the theme of this administration? It's nepotism. And why does it equate to corruption? Is because there's a benefit. Who benefits? Jeffrey Madre benefits from numerous females getting overtime. Who else benefits from these people getting overtime? Because they don't have to do their work. So the question is this. Because Tiny Kinsella here is the first deputy commissioner, is testifying. She's given testimony on her performance and her ability to have a check and balance to actually analyze overtime. We're talking about city taxpayer money. This is very important here. So the question is this, and this is why we also have no trust and credibility with this administration. For one, I have a question, John. Did they actually conduct biweekly meetings? Is this an all-out lie? Did these meetings actually never happen? And if they did actually have meetings, was she there? Was she present at these meetings? And if she was present at these meetings, what did they actually look at? What did they actually talk about? Because clearly she's inept, inadequate, doesn't know her job. And make no mistake about it. I'm going to give you full disclosure here. John and I worked with her early on in our careers. We were all rookies together. So this is not personal, but this is a fact. The bottom line is if you work for a private administration right now, a private organization, if you're Tiny Kinsella and you cost this city or this business millions of dollars, you'd be fired. You would be fired. Absolutely. The bottom line is your job is to ensure that there is no misuse of overtime. Your job was to find where the problem is and identify it, and you did it. So even if you had no idea, if you have great moral principle and you're a person of integrity, it's an epic fail. So this is an entire failure.
I agree with you. None of this is personal. None of this is because, especially for Tanya, because even though she was calling, some of her staff were calling around and asking where I work and where I live. And I believe that was to try to tell my boss and smear me and do all that stuff. I don't know if she was behind it or not, but none of this is personal. We've gotten numerous pieces of credible information that we never put out these last 2 years about you. So absolutely none of this is personal. I harbor no hard towards feelings personally towards her or anybody in her office or in any of these offices. But it is what it is. The truth is a terrible thing, and that's what we're discussing right now. The truth is, you're 100% right, Eric, when you say there's multiple tiers in the police department. You're on point. Right? What's the tier system? Break it down for me because I'm going to mess it up.
No, I say it all the time. There is no doubt about it. There's a 3-tiered system on this job. And the first one is upper echelon, along with nepotism. They're in one basket. Then you have the khaki pants, and then you have general population. There's no doubt about it. There's a 3-tier system. It's playing out right in front of our eyes.
Exactly. So when she talks about those those meetings happen, those biweekly, and I know for a fact those biweekly meetings happen. Those biweekly meetings happen, but the first two tiers are excluded from being scrutinized in those meetings. It's only general population that they were concerned with. When they look at corruption, or they look at who they're gonna, or they look at who we're gonna discipline for actions, there's two standards. It's, oh, your general population. Oh, you're in the top two tiers. Oh, we got a completely different way that this allegation is going to go. We're going to investigate this a completely different way. And don't worry, nothing's going to happen to you. But when you're in general population, we're going to hold you to the utmost accountability. We are going to hammer you. So I'm under the impression, and I could just tell by the reactions to all this in the paper and the amount of cops that are now beginning to speak out publicly using their own voices and their own names. I could just tell that this is a big morale booster for those people in general population, because they're seeing finally there's some accountability in the New York City Police Department. For the people that are up on the news lying to you every day, telling you crime's down, when in fact crime's through the roof. For those people, there's actually starting to be some accountability for what they did. So we got about 910 people on here. It's 9:17. We'll probably go a little bit after 10. You guys can just do us a favor, like, subscribe, share out this space. We appreciate you. If you like what you're listening to, we're talking about not only the overtime corruption scandal, but also the sex and lies inside of the NYPD and what that means for the rank and file, what that ultimately means for public safety. But that's how I see this. When I listen to her, I hear, we investigated general population. We didn't look at us. Why would we look at us?
John, I think you nailed. By the way, I hope you feel better, man. I felt like that a couple of weeks ago, and I still have some remnants of a cough, so feel better. But yeah, I want to actually make this clear that people understand. The overwhelming majority of the police department actually falls into general population. It's actually a small percentage that falls into this tiered system, but yet this tiered system, the khaki pants, and those in nepotism at the upper echelon, those in nepotism that are connected to the upper echelon and the upper echelon themselves, it's actually a small percentage in comparison to the general population, but yet they're the ones that hold the keys and the power. That's why when I hear from general population, this job sucks. The job sucks. And I say, you know what? You're right. Because who is the job? And I've been saying this for years, and I hope my friends and listeners agree. The job is Tiny Kinsella. The job is Jeffrey Madre, John Schell, Kaz Daughtry. It's the upper echelon that holds the keys to the job, that actually has the power. They have the leverage to actually implement policy. They actually have the ability to create morale. They have the ability to make sure that things are run properly. So they're the job. So that's why I say when people say the job sucks, yeah, you talk about people. That's who sucks. It's failed leadership. And it's a corrupt enterprise right now. It's a complete criminal enterprise what's going on at the upper echelon. They're a small tier in comparison to the general population, but they hold the keys and they have all the power and the weight, and they're using it against the general population. That's why internal affairs cannot be trusted. We see investigations for the upper echelon, and the deflection is, and it's completely abusive. It's misconduct. It's discipline to some cop. Somehow some cop involved in some case where there was a complaint to the upper echelon receives the discipline. Why? Because they're henchmen to protect the upper echelon and nepotism, and they actually induce discipline to general population to deflect from the upper echelon. So Tiny Kinsella is fully responsible, accountable, should be held liable. Howard T., shout out to you, brother. Coffee and donuts, $4.99. The nepotism in the NYPD is just as bad as the nepotism in Washington, D.C., and it makes me sick. Absolutely. It should be sickening, and I hope everyone's fed up with it. And we'll probably hear, nepotism's been going on for years. Yes, there'll always be a form of nepotism, but we have to constantly fight it. We have to constantly combat corruption. We have to constantly combat nepotism, because if you do not, it will fester. And right now, it's more egregious than ever. And these people have to be held accountable. If we just sat by and sat idle, if we didn't say anything, our friends and listeners didn't say a word, do you realize how bad this could be? I mean, what's next? Would they just, I mean, honestly, I know this sounds crazy, but could they do this, John? Could they call over, you know what, one of these guys at the upper echelon identified a woman that they like and say, hey, bring her in. Oh, she's in the 7-5 right now. Bring her in. Get her off patrol. Bring her in. And they bring her in the back and rape her. Now, listen, I'm not saying they're going to do that, but could they do it? And that's the point. If we don't combat corruption, and you're not combating nepotism, how far could it go? I mean, I heard there was this thing called a mandate, John, where they force people to take something they didn't want to do and lose their job. So I don't know. Ask Marlon Bethel. He knows. Rob Marine, shout out to you, brother. $9.99. More coffee and donuts. I support you 100%. 23 years on the job. Abuse of overtime, discretionary promotions in every administration. Yes, it's completely abusive right now. We see nepotism equate to promotions, but right now we're seeing promotions by rocket fuel. Ingrid Sanders was promoted 2 times or 3 times in a 2-year span, where she received an amazing amount of overtime and made it to first-grade detective. That's insane. This is just sloppy work by the current one. Every boss abused the OT for their minions. Yeah, I mean, exactly. Every boss at the upper echelon is abusing the overtime for their minions, and that's why, again, if you have a star on your shoulder, sit back and think how many times you were pressured at Comstat about overtime. You're pressured at Comstat about overtime. You have some case detective who couldn't come in on his day off to work his case. Someone brought in a collar. Some cop in a sector, in a precinct, brought in your collar. And the detective had the opportunity to come in from home, to make a day's overtime, to work that case. He did all the work in the case, and he doesn't get the collar because of overtime. And yet, what's going on in One Police Plaza? Absolutely. And that 1 star, 2 star, 3 star didn't say a word.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous, dude. You know, and speaking of the mandate, you know, it also applies to the tier, right? Because all these people that have been getting promoted, all these people we're talking about in the overtime, all these people in the upper echelon, they share something very similar with me and Marlon. They also didn't take what we didn't want, right? But they either didn't have to put an exemption in, or they put an exemption in and was approved, or they put an exemption in and it never got to them, conveniently. Conveniently, the mandate ended when it never got, you know. So yeah, depending on your tier, how close you are to the circle of nepotism, another reason that the mandate was completely arbitrary and capricious. Another reason it was completely discriminatory. Because all of them didn't do it. So Sal Greco actually reported on this. He reported on this first. He not picking on this kid, but it's just another highlight in the tiers that happen in the New York City Police Department, and how there's 2 sets of justice, 2 sets of standards when it comes to overtime, when it comes to money making, when it comes to discipline, when it comes to everything, termination, when it comes to everything. So Michael Devenish, police officer at Chief of Department's office. He worked at the 7-9 and the 114. We know who worked at the 7-9 precinct, right? So he started in July 14. So, you know, he's cracking 10 years now, 11 years on the job. Still, in my opinion, a rookie. He made $263,000 last year. Right? So he works in the Chief of Department's office. Let's take a look at a discipline case that he has. So on March 16th of 2021, the Internal Affairs Bureau, along with the Department Advocate, along with the Police Commissioner, Michael Devenish pleaded guilty to improperly using department property. He violated uniform rules, and he was armed without a shield. He pleaded guilty to attending an unlicensed location. He pleaded guilty to doing off-duty employment without permission. starting to sound like the same case that Sal Greco had. He pleaded guilty to, criminal association. He pleaded guilty to impeded in an investigation. He pleaded guilty. He made misleading statements during an official department interview. He pleaded guilty that he violated department motor vehicle rules. He pleaded guilty that he made computer inquiries unrelated to official department business. He pleaded guilty that he improperly intervened. His penalty, dismissal probation for 12 months, pre-trial suspension of 31 days. He was suspended without pay for 29 days, and he gave up another 20 vacation days. And then he was rewarded and sent to the chief of department's office. Now, why is this important? This is important because when you look at Sal Greco's case, he had about only half of those allegations, which he didn't plead guilty on, and the NYPD never proved. And they terminated him. So you have one cop who he took a large hit, right? He pleaded guilty. He took a large hit. He lost about 60, 70 days there. Made a mistake. Sounded like he was doing off-duty employment, and he was around people who have an arrest record. He criminally associated like the entire upper echelon of the NYPD does every day. So he did all this stuff, and he pleaded guilty, and he lost a lot of days, and then he was ultimately rewarded by going to the chief of department's office. Sal Greco was accused about half of that. The department did a half-ass, and in my opinion, criminal investigation because they lied during that investigation to obtain documents that proved that, in fact, he wasn't doing what they accused him of doing, but yet they doubled down on it, and they slammed him and they fired him. And that is just another example of the circle of nepotism. And this just further proves how the firing of the Sal Greco was political. It was absolutely political. It was absolutely arbitrary and capricious because, like Eric Adams, who was guilty of all these same charges, by the way, too, he kept his job. But Sal Greco, because he was a Trump supporter, and at that time, Eric wasn't MAGA. Shell was closet MAGA. At that time, it wasn't cool to be MAGA. We crush and destroy Sal Greco, but we reward this kid.
Hypocrisy. I agree with you, John. That was my argument to the unions when I was in the position where I was attacked by an overzealous civilian complaint review board. I had 8 sets of administrative charges in a 6-week period. I was facing potential termination. I was not allowed due process. I was only able to take 2 cases to trial. In one of those cases, I was found completely not guilty where they asked for termination. So I had 6 other cases, and because of the lack of manpower from CCRB, I was unable to fight these. And I was not able to get promoted. I was told by the upper echelon at least this is what I was told by the unions through conversations with the upper echelon, that I am not promotable, that I cannot be promoted to captain because of the civilian complaints. Now, I never received any discipline on the job. My entire career, I had no discipline other than the civilian complaints. So my opposition and my argument was, okay, if I cannot be promoted to captain, and I did well, I'm on the list, I'm about to get promoted. If I cannot get promoted to captain because of my record with civilian complaints, show me someone in the upper echelon. Obviously, I was being facetious because I already did my homework. Show me someone in the upper echelon that has a worse discipline case than mine, and I'll prove to you that I should be promoted. And obviously, the unions completely deflected, said, don't worry, you're gonna have a nice life, you're gonna have a good pension, and I was not able to be promoted. So there was absolutely no standard, and that was my point: was how can I not be promotable when you have people in positions at the upper echelon that have far worse discipline records than I do, and the civilian complaints that I have did not play out yet. They're substantiated by the Civilian Complaint Review Board, but you're still innocent until proven guilty, because I do have the right to due process to take them to an administrative trial, which I was not afforded that opportunity. I was told I would have to wait 3 more years. But I'm sure if I was a cohort and I hung out at Consafritos, if I had ties to the upper echelon, my case would have been far different. But I was part of general population. And that's why I say there's a completely different tiered system. And ultimately, the gavel when it comes to the tiered system is hypocrisy. Because Sal Greco was wrongfully terminated with half the allegations of this particular cop. And yet this cop was awarded to the chief of department's office. I mean, pled guilty to numerous cases, and especially with the ties to nepotism, I'm sure this cop would have been afforded the right to administrative trial. But again, hypocrisy after hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible what they did to Sal. You know, the firing was arbitrary and capricious as the firing of Marlon Bethel. And then the same thing as what happened to Juan Perez. And then when you look at, you have an 18-year lieutenant stepping on people's heads who are completely defenseless and send them into a convulsion, and absolutely nothing happens. But Juan Perez, who was put in a chokehold and attacked, threw a couple of punches defending himself, and he gets indicted. And the job completely turns their back on him. While this kid gets overtime the entire time. Command the choice, still rewarded, still top tier. Absolutely ridiculous. Somebody says it here, remove the police department from City Hall control. I honestly think it has to go that way, because unfortunately, the term honorable, when we relate it to the office of New York City mayor, shouldn't use that term now, because I will not refer to Eric Adams as honorable. I wouldn't refer to Ed Caban as honorable police commissioner. The honorables today just aren't so honorable. And there's numerous judges in New York City that also, I would not use the term honorable to describe. It's the pattern in New York City that's most disturbing to me. And I think we spoke about it a little bit before. It's just how criminal centric our society is, that if you're a criminal, we're so sensitive to criminals' rights and to criminals' allegations. When there's any wrongdoing alleged by an actual criminal against New York City, the city doesn't even fight the case. They just settle it. But when the city actually does wrongdoing, and there's irrefutable proof, when it comes to the case of Sal Greco, when it comes to the case of Marlon Bethel, when it comes to my own lawsuit, irrefutable. Violated religious rights. They were arbitrary and capricious in the way they terminated. They terminate some for others. They keep some for other. It's irrefutable, arbitrary and capricious. It's irrefutable, it was discriminatory. Irrefutable evidence. But the fact that we're not criminals, the fact that women are saying that they were sexually harassed, who aren't criminals, they were police officers, or they were regular civilians. New York City will waste hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funds to fight those cases. We're so criminal centric that for criminals, we settle the case. But when New York City actually does wrongdoing, because the people who are running New York City enact in criminal behavior, we fight those cases tooth and nail. And some of you morons, some of you dumb people are mad at us for suing, and not mad at New York City for what they're doing. And this could be you, it could be your mother, it could be your wife, it could be your daughters, it could be your kids. And you're so dumb, you can't even see that. So instead of talking about what's wrong in New York City, you attack me, you attack Eric, you attack Sal, you attack Marlon, when you don't attack the criminality of Sal.
Patrick Donahue says it right here. Disciplinary record only matters when you aren't in the ink click. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we actually see it reflected out in the disciplinary matrix. John and I have reported on the disciplinary matrix since the inception of this podcast. We've been talking about it for 2 years right now. And when it comes to the disciplinary matrix, it's actually designed to support this three-tiered system in the police department, because you have presumptive, which is your automatic penalties. But then if you're in general population, you'll get what's called the aggravating factors. Your rank will play a part. Your discipline will play a part in your discipline process in your particular incident. But if you're part of nepotism in the upper echelon, you get what's called the mitigating factors. And the mitigating factors are meant for nepotism. I mean, honestly, how do you have, there are cases, I think it's, I'm trying to remember what the case is, but in the disciplinary matrix, where the automatic penalty, I think, is 20 days. And the mitigating factor and the aggravating factor are huge opposite sides of the spectrum. The aggravating factor is termination, and the mitigating factor is 1 penalty day. How do we get such a separation? If that doesn't highlight the hypocrisy and how this tiered system with nepotism plays a role. John, do you remember what it is? I'm trying to remember how I think it's actually lying, right? Or I'm trying to remember which one. It doesn't matter. The point is that there's a particular violation or infraction that you could actually get terminated, but if you have a mitigating factor, lose 1 day. I mean, Jeffrey Madre, we've seen how his CCRB played out. I mean, clearly you can see numerous CCRBs that I had were just completely ridiculous on behalf of violent perpetrators, and some of them, they were still incarcerated while they made the complaint, and the entire trial played out where the complainant was actually still incarcerated. But this is a different tiered system. I mean, I think the disciplinary matrix, John, really highlights how it plays out with this tiered system.
Yeah, I mean, and Juju just hooked me on this one. I'm sorry, but he just hooked me. He said, John, who hasn't been to church in years, became a devout Christian because of the mandate. Talk about gaming the system. So that's something that, I've been thinking about a lot, Juju. So I'm glad you brought this up. And it's faith and belief, and it's actually saying and doing what you say. And to me, faith aligns with the oath you swore, right? Because swearing that oath is very hard. And I don't think people really take the responsibility of that oath. I don't think many people take the responsibility. Eric is, he's of Jewish. He was raised in a Jewish household, but he says he's not a devout Jew. He's not a devout Christian. He studies Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism. So he's all over the place. He's a hippie, right? Eric's a hippie Marine, but he's all over the place. But Eric, he's a very righteous person. And he swore 2 oaths. He swore an oath in the United States Marines, and then he swore an oath in the New York City Police Department. And he embodied that oath, right? He embodied that oath regardless of what happened. And I don't think many people embody the oath they swear, or actually when it comes to faith, like Juju's pointing out here, he says, I haven't been to church. And I mean, I couldn't be furthest from the truth, but regardless if you are or you don't go to church, to me, going to church means nothing. It doesn't mean that you're a good Catholic. It doesn't mean that you're a devout, the following Christian. It doesn't mean that you're a believer in Christ. It just means you go to church. Like saying, I'm a Christian. Like saying, I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America, and then you break all the rules of that. You go to work every day and you disregard the Constitution of the United States of America. So, I mean, I don't think we put enough emphasis on that. And I think that's what this show has been highlighting, is that there are people that should be in policing. And unfortunately, there are many people that shouldn't be in policing. And for the world to sit there and say, you don't believe in this because of whatever, you took an aspirin one time in your life, or you didn't go to church every Sunday, or you worked most Sundays. It's the ultimate hypocrisy, because what we're doing is we're removing righteous people out of positions of authority when we shouldn't. We're removing people like Eric Dim. We're removing people like myself out of it. And so you definitely hooked me with it, but I just think it's a good conversation, because there's a lot of people in policing that just shouldn't be there. and they swore an oath, they don't even understand what they swore the oath to, and they don't even care about it. They're going to do whatever John Shell told me, whatever Miguel Iglesias told me. And, it's hard. It's hard. If you're really going to be a cop, it's a hard road. If you're really going to be a follower of Christ, it's a hard road.
Well said. Well said. I agree with you, because when you take that oath is to the U.S. Constitution. When you take that oath, it's to the Constitution. It's not to John Shell. It's not to Jeffrey Madre. It's not to the upper echelon of the police department. If you're taking an oath and swearing into the police department, you're swearing into the police department, and you're saying you'll honor the oath to the U.S. Constitution as you're working under the thumb of the NYPD. And that's why, we did a prior episode a while back, probably about a year already, where we talk about, did you take an oath or did you take an omerta? Because there's a difference, and your oath is to the U.S. Constitution. You have to honor that. Whether it's the Marine Corps, NYPD, whatever the case is, if any military service, or if you take an oath to a law enforcement agency, you're taking an oath to the U.S. Constitution. And we talk about church and state, and I think, it's good to have values, right? Whether you have religion or spirituality, but you have to have values or values from your family, and they do correlate to your work under your oath. And your oath should not be, hey, I'll do whatever Jeffrey Madre wants, whatever John Shell wants at Gas Daughtry, because they're at the upper echelon of the police department. They're people. They're people, and they are the job. And do you want to work for a job that is not a good representation of yourself? That's why it's important to have moral principle. And yes, it's not easy to stand on moral principle. You're going to get blowback, right? You're going to get pushback, and we understand that. But that's why there should be strength in having those values. And part of having values is having a support system, right? I think they kind of go hand in hand. If you're part of a church, you're part of a religion, you're part of an organization, you have values, but you have a support system. Those people make you feel strength. That's why I think we're so strong out there and so effective with this podcast, is because it's not just, John and I were just talking about this earlier offline before we started. And we said, this is not about me and John and Sal and Marlon and Bethel. It's bigger than us. It's all of us together. We've built this family. We've built this network. And that's why we've been so effective to actually talk about what's going on with the upper echelon and really expose our perspective on the corruption that's going on. Did we do the investigation on corruption? Not necessarily, right? I mean, journalists are putting out a lot of great information, and a lot of the corruption is kind of exposing itself. But we've put an eye on it and tell people where to look and break down the perspective of it. So, and it's because we're all working together. We have values, and we believe that we want a better version of the police department, because at some time we, active and retired that are on here, or friends and listeners, we've taken an oath. And people that are not police, that are here on this podcast, or people that watch it, or people that are family and friends to cops, expect you to honor that oath, because that oath reflects on them also, because they live under the U.S. Constitution. So I do believe church and state, there is a dichotomy and a separation, but at points it does come together. And for someone to say, all of a sudden, you didn't go to church, now you're religious, I think it's the most ridiculous thing. And, I think you're right, John. I'm Jewish. I honor, I had a bar mitzvah, but I don't consider myself a devout Jew. I don't go to temple all the time. I don't necessarily do everything that's very Jewish. I mean, I have a lot of tattoos, but I honor it. I'm from Jewish faith. I won't allow anyone to say bad things about Jewish people. I'll defend it. I'll support it. But yeah, I've taken pride in reading some stuff in the Bible, and I want to understand Christianity, and I really love Buddhism. I read a lot about it. And so does that make me not religious because I like to read about different religions? Do you have to focus on one? But this is just failed ideology. This is coming from a loser Juju who's got nothing better to do but spend 8 hours a day watching this podcast while working for the NYPD. Eric, great name, brother. Shout out to you. $9.99 coffee and donuts. Look at Juju. Good managing your time on company time by bashing. I'm just saying that, right? This YouTube channel, LOL. This is a great channel, LOL. Yeah, thank you, brother. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And Veronica Electron, happy Hanukkah. She says, happy Hanukkah. Eric, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And, I hope everyone's having a great holiday.
Yeah, so we don't know what Eric got for Christmas, Eric Adams. I know he was hoping for a pardon. He has him with his MAGA hat on, Santa. We don't know. For those of you that don't follow our social media, check it out at The Finest Cast on X, at The Finest Unfiltered on Instagram. Instagram's personally my favorite, not because I love the platform, but just because we could put music with all these, and I think we've been hitting the nail on the head with the music pairing on these memes. So we got over 1,000 people with us. Thanks for joining us this morning. We're talking about sex lies and overtime, NYPD corruption. You guys could just do us a favor. If you could like, subscribe, share the space out. We appreciate it. We're going to go for a little while longer. But yeah, I think that's the main problem. What we see in policing today is there are a lot of people that say things. Oh, I'm a cop. I believe in the Constitution. I'm a good God-fearing Christian, like Eric Adams likes to say. But then when it comes time to actually show that you're going to do that, and you actually do follow that path, you're actually abused by it. And and the people claiming to be Christians and Catholics and all that, they turn their back on you, which would happen during the mandate to me. To me, I'm sorry, it was the ultimate litmus test. I sat up knowing it was going to come. I knew it was going to come for like 3 months. You remember, I saw you in the summer before the mandate came. We were at an LBA meeting, and I was going nuts about it. I knew it was coming. Turco even said it's coming. Everyone knew it was coming. So for those months, I was actually on vacation. I left my vacation to come to that LBA meeting. I left where I was to drive back to New York to go be at that meeting. For months I sat there and like literally, I was like, I'm telling you, like I literally wrestled with myself. Am I going to leave my career over this? And I was like, and I had came to the conclusion, well, I'm going to request for a religious exemption because ultimately you're asking me to violate my conscience. Ultimately, you're asking me to lie. But I knew once I did that, there was no going back. There was no going back on it. I can't submit a religious exemption and then say, oh, well, you didn't give it to me. Okay, I'll just do what you told me. I can't do it. That's the ultimate sin, in my opinion. That is, to me, is denying God. That's denying my faith. That's turning my back on my faith. That's the ultimate betrayal. That, to me, that was like the ultimate betrayal. I'm like, I'm either going to convince myself to do this, to do something I don't believe in, bend my integrity, go against my faith, or I'm going the whole way. And that's it. And once I made the decision, I can't do this. All the people of faith show up to church every Sunday, great Catholics, talk about honor and faith. Eric Adams said he came in to flip the tables over just like Jesus. They all were they turned their backs. They turned their backs on people like myself, people like Marlon Bethel, numerous other people. And I think the last 3 years have exhibited who actually has faith. I really do. I think the last 3 years has shown actually who the devout religious people are and who they aren't. And it's not for the show. And it's the same goes true when we talk about public safety. When we talk about being a cop, putting a uniform on, having a Punisher sticker on your bumper, saying you back the blue or putting a blue line flag on your Twitter handle or on your Instagram does not mean that you're an actual cop or you support public safety. It just doesn't. And we're seeing that, and that's what the lines are blurring. We're seeing who people should actually be cops. The fact that Eric Dim's not employed no longer by the New York City Police Department is a big problem, and why crime is up in the New York City Police Department. Because like Eric said, it's not just Eric Dim. It's not just Marlon Bethel. It's not just Sal Greco. It's not just John McCarry. There are thousands of us. Thousands of us who should be in policing, who should be in policing leadership, who should be training new people and upholding the integrity of the department. But we were all removed from the city on purpose.
I agree with you. And that's the loss that we sustained by former police commissioner Dermot Shea by disbanding anti-crime. You had veteran cops in that unit that were training new cops that came in. I'm sure people will argue, oh, you get some 3-year guys with 3 years on the job that went to anti-crime. And that's true. There are guys that are very young on the job that went to anti-crime, but they had cops there with experience, veteran cops and experienced supervisors to mold them, to teach them to do proper police work, which in comparison to the citywide response team that they're running around right now, most of those cops, the overwhelming majority that are put in citywide response team, are there because they have a hook. It's whether their uncle is on the job, someone that was related to them knows the chief, that they're there by nepotism. And they're there with 2-3 years on the job. And the supervisors are there by nepotism. And they're lacking experience, so they're not getting that knowledge. And they're running around like reckless cowboys. They're running around like reckless cowboys because they know that they're not held accountable in the sense that general population is. And when you're aware of that, you're going to lack discipline because you're not accountable and liable in the same manner. There's no discipline to face in the same way that someone with general population does. So that infects their ability and impedes their ability to actually do their job with discipline.
What happened? Did we lose you?
No. I didn't freeze. Why?
Oh, no. I thought you stopped. Sorry. I was in the background looking at something. But yeah, so what else came out? So Madre gets kicked out of his house. He's got a bad weekend. But another thing that came out, and I think that really shows exactly what we're saying is true and nails it, that the NYPD's been corrupted, that Group 1 is completely corrupted and needs a removal, that the upper echelon of the Internal Affairs Bureau and the NYPD need to be removed, is you need to look at the case against Jeffrey Madre. He was accused of voiding an arrest and impeding an investigation by getting one of his friends, a retired cop, off of a gun charge. You know, these kids like broke his camera or broke his window or something. He chased the kids down. Suppose he pulled a gun on them. Like I said, I probably wouldn't have collared the guy myself, but there was probable cause that what these kids said happened, that he actually did in fact pull a gun on them. So the sergeant investigated. He got video evidence of it. He investigated the case. He got video evidence of it. And I'm sure there's a lot more details that we don't know about. But by all means, the sergeant that was on patrol that responded to that 911 call did his job, what he was paid and trained to do. He followed procedure. He did it down the line. Jeffrey Madre was found guilty of abuse of authority. Police Commissioner Keechon Sewell investigated that case herself and wanted to discipline Jeffrey Madre. And Jeffrey Madre was never disciplined. But you know who was disciplined? The guy that was in general population. The sergeant that did his job. He was the guy that was disciplined. He ultimately paid for the sins of Jeffrey Madre when he didn't do anything wrong. And that proves right there this tiered system. That proves right there that there are different levels of justice and discipline in the NYPD. We showed it with myself, showed it with Marlon Bethel, we showed it with Sal Greco, we're showing it with Dim, we're now showing it with this sergeant. This sergeant does his job, but he gets in trouble because Jeffrey Madre did something he shouldn't have done. That he had no control of, by the way.
And that solidifies and validates what we've been saying about the deflection from the complaint to the upper echelon. So the complaint is that he abuses authority. The investigation is to Jeffrey Madre, his position. And then the low-level tier, the general population sergeant, faces ultimate discipline to deflect from Jeffrey Madre. Somehow he gets wrapped up to that case. Now, you can look at this different ways. And I agree. John and I both spoke about this. And we personally would not have making that arrest. But since that arrest was made, that sergeant was the frontline supervisor. He had the discretion to make the decision. Ultimately, he made the decision, and his decision was impeded by Jeffrey Madre, completely cut his wings, and ultimately abused his authority. That's the whole point. The point about this is whether or not should the arrest not be made or not. Did Jeffrey Madre do the right thing as far as the arrest? That's not the point. The point is that he abuses authority by impeding in this case where the sergeant, the front supervisor that was there, made the decision Jeffrey Madre had no business getting involved in this case at all. It actually violates department policy, and he should have been disciplined for abuse of authority, and he was not. Why? Because he falls in the tiered system that does not receive discipline. Francois Villon, if I'm saying the last name right, I'm sorry, Francois or maybe Villon. 1999 coffee and donuts. Shout out to you. Thank you so much, brother. Says Sepa Fidelis. Here we go. Ron Lacey's going to put down the EDM. Sepa Fi, brother. I appreciate it. Fight the good fight. Yes, brother. Yeah, we always learn the Marine Corps. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. You know, you have to have values. It's important. You know, that's why I want to make that comparison, John. Don't you think it's amazing? We have a female sergeant. Now, I'm not saying she's right. She should be held accountable. But we have a female sergeant that stole cough syrup. She stole cough syrup, which could be a $10 item. Her face was blasted in the papers. She'll possibly lose her career. There was scandalous pictures of her put out recently. I forgot her last name was Manho. And she'll potentially lose her career. And she stole cough syrup. This amount of abuse of overtime, let's talk about millions. How can we even compare? There's no comparison. And she potentially may lose her career. And I hold, Quetisha Epps responsible also. I don't think she's a victim in this either. And she potentially stole over $200,000. And yes, she's going to have a pension because now she's a whistleblower. And yet this sergeant who stole cough syrup is a shoplifter and she'll lose her career. So how do we have any standards on the job? There's no comparisons. There's no metric of measure. Stephen Bishop Lee, my brother, shout out to you. $5 coffee and donuts. Is it too soon to say this? I told you so. And can I get unfucked now since I got fucked for trying to help expose this? Happy holidays and stay safe. Yes, Stephen, you're a brother. You're part of the finest Unfiltered family here. We want what's best for you here. Absolutely. And it's kind of, I think, Stephen, your case is kind of similar to John, myself, and Sal and Marlon. We've moved on for the police department. I'm not sure if our place is ever back with the police department. I hope it is for Marlon. I hope that he gets reinstated and compensated, vindicated, and same thing for Sal Greco. But particularly when it comes to myself and John and you, Stephen, I don't think we belong in the police department anymore. I think at this point we have to do good by being the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, so we have to speak out about it. We have to push back, and that's what we have to do. We have to push back by being the voice. By being the squeaky wheel gets the oil. We got a lot of trolls on here, John. We're pretty terrible. It's funny how we have the finest Unfiltered family, our friends and listeners here. We put out a podcast, and we have a team of trolls here. So I laugh at it. I think these people have nothing better to do. They're calling us losers and making fun of us. And the funny part is, you're calling us losers, but you're watching us. So thank you for being on here, trolls. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no. Labro saying, so you're saying a cop's allowed to steal? No, that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is, what's worse? Stealing cough syrup or stealing millions of taxpayer funds? What's worse? Stealing cough syrup or sexually abusing women and putting women who are under your supervision, women who are vulnerable because they're cancer patients, because they have a terminal illness, because they're in financial debt, and taking advantage of them when you're in a position of authority? What's worse? I'm not saying that it's right to steal. I'm not saying that she should continue her career. But what I am saying is, whatever happens with her, whatever we deem needs to happen with her, whatever the consequences are, they should be 20 times worse for the other person. 20 times worse. 20 times worse. That's what we're saying. Let's have a level of comparison here. That's what we're saying. Let's compare. Why wasn't Jeffrey Madre immediately removed of his gun and shield? Why wasn't the investigation immediately begun once the allegation came out? That's all we're saying. We're saying there needs to be a standard. Alvin Bragg, it's over his head. It's everywhere. Go on his Twitter, go on the landing page of Alvin Bragg. One standard of justice for all. Couldn't be further from the truth in that office. Couldn't be further from the truth in Eric Adams' administration. couldn't be further from the truth in the NYPD. There's not one standard of justice for all. And there's not one standard of anything in the NYPD. When it comes to overtime, when it comes to assignment, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to investigative authority. And they prove it all by themselves every day. We don't have to even do anything. We don't have to even say anything. We just have to come on and, oh, look at that. Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. That's all we're saying.
That's my point. That's my point exactly. I agree with you. That's what I'm trying to exemplify to bring the point home here. And listen, if the trolls actually want to listen, you want to learn something, we're talking about hypocrisy, talk about standards, metric, and measure. Do I believe that a cop should be out there stealing and shoplifting? No. Do I believe she should be held accountable? But if her penalty is being modified and suspended, I believe she was suspended. Am I right, John? I believe that female sergeant that stole cough syrup was suspended. And yet we have Jeffrey Madre, who has these atrocities going on, is able to just leave out the door and run his time and not be suspended. That's insane to me. Where's the metric of measure? And we have a female lieutenant who potentially stole over $200,000, using her body as a benefit, and yet she was not. She was given the opportunity to vest out, and obviously now she's a whistleblower, so things change on that for her. She used the right hand, but where is the metric of measure? People should be accountable, but the punishment has to fit the crime. But unfortunately, because of this 3-tiered system, we see an unbalance. And you have to admit, even the trolls here, you have to admit that the metric of measure, you see it's completely unbalanced. If you're a general population and you steal cough syrup, you will get fired. If you use your body and make over $200,000 in a year, well, you have an opportunity to actually getting a pension. And if you're Jeffrey Madre and you impede on an arrest and investigation, well, guess what? You will actually face no entire discipline. So we have to admit there's a 3-tiered system. And at some point, it has to stop. And the only way this is going to stop is if the squeaky wheel gets the oil. We have to keep our finger on it. That's why I say, shout out to my brother, Steven. I'm sorry what happened to you, but you are being vindicated. People are starting to realize what this police department does. And if you're critical and if they face any opposition, you attack the ego of the upper echelon, they will come for you. And how do they come for you? We were trying to figure out in the beginning, right? Well, they're not going to physically come and attack you. Maybe some, maybe. All cops was threatening their lives to our children, and we took it seriously, and I still take it seriously. I think if you have the balls to actually put that out on social media, what are you actually capable of? Clearly, you're unhinged. But the point is they come after you by smearing you, by slandering you, by trying to give the appearance that you're someone that's emotionally disturbed, that you're not coherent, that you're a radical, or what do? They paint you as a racist. That was the last straw to try to smear John and myself and paint us as racist. That is that's a strong allegation, but that's what's coming from the upper echelon. This is a complete criminal enterprise. So if you focus just on this issue of sex, you're not seeing the whole ball of wax. And you know what? I think kind of that's what Jessica Tish and Eric Adams wants at this point. People to be so narrowed in and focused on the sex scandal, right? Because it's attractive, it's drama. And then people start to miss everything else that's going on. So take your eyes off this. Don't just focus on this, okay? Focus on the whole entire ball of wax. This is just one window. This whole sex thing is a deflection from really what's going on. And what's going on is the upper echelon of the police department thinks it's their department. It's their party department. They can use it to have sex. They can use it to make money. They can use it to go on trips. They can use it to impede investigations. They can do whatever they want. If they want to crush you, if you're general population, look, I've seen it. A lieutenant I used to work with in PSA 7, he went to the neighborhood safety training and he asked questions. All he did was ask questions. And within 4 seconds, a phone call was made to Jeffrey Madre's office. I'm talking about abuse of authority. That lieutenant was requested to one police plaza and he was transferred that day for asking a question to one of the attorneys that was offended by his question. Apparently you're not allowed to ask questions. And I thought, that's good. You should ask questions. And he was bounced like a basketball in one day. Tom, shout out to you. Coffee and Donuts, another hit. Thank you so much. $1.99. Juju just admitted he doesn't watch this by choice. That's outstanding. John, do you have that comment? We need that. I'll forward that to Internal Affairs today.
Yeah, I have it all. I have it all saved.
Even though that doesn't go anywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juju. We appreciate it. And I'm sure Labro is also being ordered. Make sure when you put on your overtime slips, put down your fake monikers. I appreciate it. But we'll never know who these people are. They got no balls.
Yeah, absolute losers. What was the other thing I wanted to talk about? Oh, before we get off topic, Tabitha Foster, while the department was investigating the relationship between Madre and I was modified, but he was not. Perfect example again. Rules for thee, not for me. You know, so yeah, a lot of slanderous stuff been happening, right? A lot of stuff coming out now. A lot of people not fans of the podcast, but watch every day. Crazy stuff, man. And I can't wrap my head around how. I can understand why people are not fond of us. I get that, and the podcast. I 100% understand that. But I just don't get like the hate that they exhibit towards themselves. Like they never put themselves in the other person's shoes. Like people sit here and beat the crap out of Tabitha. They'll sit here and beat the crap out of Steven. They'll sit here, they'll beat the crap out of me, out of you, out of Marlon, out of Sal. But they never realize, like, hey, that could be me. They never realize. They never put themselves in their shoes. And to me, it's like, it's the dumbest thing, man. It's so dumb. I'm like, all right. I'm like, you don't have to like me. You could say I was arrogant, I was this, I was that. Okay, fair. You know, Eric thought who he was, blah, blah, blah. Same, you know, you could do all that stuff. I get it. But you never put yourself in the shoes. You never step out and say, this is absolutely wrong. And hold the people who should be accountable. You know, I keep getting calls about Governor Kathy Hochul. Oh, could you come on and talk about the transit? You know, we played the video here the other day. Crimes up in transit, murders up in transit since 2019, over 200%. And that was prior to that poor girl getting burned alive on the train by an illegal immigrant. And that, you know, and yeah, Kathy Hochul's comments were completely off base. But why is the media focused on her? Why aren't they talking about all the corruption in the NYPD? Why aren't they focusing on the NYPD, who's the one, and the MTA police? Why aren't they focused on the fact that every day New York City Mayor Eric Adams gets up there and does what Kathy Hochul did the one time? He tells you that transit crime is down. Transit is safe. The subways are safe. And it's that same mentality. So I went on Newsmax last night, and we were talking about Hochul, and I'm like, yeah, it's horrible, but it's the same thing that Adams has been doing. Like, I don't understand. Like, what's the big deal? This is what they do. They lie to the public every single day. They lie to the public every day about crime stats in transit, and nobody seems to care. And the host, I think it was Rob Astorino. Rob said, he said, yeah, but Eric Adams spoke about mental illness on the subways. And I'm like, okay, that's great. He spoke about it. Wow. Does he not know he's the mayor? I was like, it's great that he spoke about it. I'm happy he spoke about it. But what is he doing about it? Billions of dollars a year in New York City taxpayer funds going to help mental illness and help homeless victims. Why are those people on the train? That falls on his shoulders. And, you know, I'm so sick of hearing. I'm so sick of the deflection of everything. It's like, let's not blame Jeffrey Madre for abusing women and misusing overtime. Let's kill Epps. Let's kill Epps. But we're not going to focus on Jeffrey Madre. Let's go after Governor Kathy Hochul, but let's not look at Adams. It's just you people just get deflected. It's so easy. So easy to deflect. If I was a manipulative person, I would be able to manipulate the entire world. I'm just not. I'm not a liar.
Spot on, brother. Spot on. Tom, shout out to you. Coffee and donuts, $1.99. He says Juju erased the comment. Yeah,
we already got it, Juju. Thank you, though. We appreciate
Juju,
it.
we appreciate it. Not fast enough today, are you? But John, you're 100% right. And listen, I think that's where people are missing the mark and getting the idea that we're giving the lieutenant a pass saying she's a victim because we're holding Jeffrey Madre accountable. I'm not saying she's a victim, but that's where this podcast and our friends and listeners that have been out on social media with Build This Network have changed the game. Because if it wasn't for us being the squeaky wheel, it would be this lieutenant who would be solely responsible. It would be isolated. It would deflect. She would take all the blame, and this would all go away. And Jeffrey Madre would be free from any responsibility and accountability. So I don't think she's a victim in this, but she's not completely fully responsible. And as we said earlier in the episode, they created the pathway that she could actually take this opportunity. They gave her this opportunity. They allowed her to get this much overtime. And apparently there's other women that got this much overtime also. They allowed her potentially to get overtime while not coming to work from being from home. And supposedly I'm hearing rumors also that potentially people at the top were getting a cut of this overtime also. I don't know how true that is, but the bottom line is, who knows what's true anymore? Who knows what to trust? I can tell you at this point, when it comes to internal affairs, I don't even want to call them at this point, because if they tell me who's actually, which they now they're telling us they have the identity of who's behind All Cops Are Woke, I don't even trust it. How can I trust that this is actually the person behind All Cops Are Woke? You know, to me, there's every reason to believe that they think that we'll go after this person and set us up, which we're not stupid. We're smart. But I don't know. I don't trust them. I don't trust them to tell me all of a sudden after a year, now you're going to tell us who's the identity behind All Cops Are Woke? I mean, what? God forbid, did this person die or something? Now that's why he'll tell us? I mean, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. So I have zero trust in what's going on right now. Internal affairs cannot be trusted. The upper echelon cannot be trusted. There's no credibility. So my message right now, if you're general population, stand by for the ride. It's going to be a bumpy one, but things are getting better. I think morale's getting better because at least right now you have a support system, and it's not coming from the union. Epic fail. I put a post out yesterday. Where are the unions in this? Silent. I attached it to the PBA. The DEA, of course, I came to with the SBA because we're both blocked. The LBA, where are the unions? The unions have been silent in this. They're not representing their members. When are the unions going to stand up and say, you know what? And we're tired of general population, which is the overwhelming majority that pay union dues, are not being represented properly. Zero. We don't hear anything. So where's the support system? New York's finest, Retired Unfiltered podcast, Sal Greco, Marlon Bethel, Steven Unfiltered, and numerous friends and listeners on the podcast. Patrick Donahue, all these people that are here, you're the support system giving these cops strength down, because the unions are not going, they're not helping at all.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Absolutely. So don't worry about it. So, don't worry about the overtime misuse. Adams is calling for the crackdown on overtime now. Don't worry, he's calling for it. So it must happen, right? It must. Now we could trust everything that's happening in the New York City Police Department. So over the weekend, this is what's happening at City Hall. The celebratory mood, baby. What I got up on the screen right now, this is Eric Adams' son up on the screen. This is a party at City Hall that they're claiming that Eric Adams' son paid for. I don't know. Just using the space, in my opinion, having a free space that's taxpayer funded. The lights are on, the water's being used, the bathroom's being used, the place is being cleaned. I don't think that's available to the public. So I think it's a whole misuse. But here we go. Let's see. Let's hear New York City Mayor Eric Adams' son. This was the party at City Hall this weekend.
Yeah.
What do you think, Eric? You buying the album or what?
I'm just upset that I wasn't invited. I didn't know that, I never seen anybody have any parties over there. I guess, I'm not buying the album. I'm a little busy right now, but yeah, he sounds great. I mean, come on. Who do they pay? And, you know, it's so funny you said that they paid for it. Who do they pay? Who do you pay? Who do you give the money in City Hall? Did it go in Eric Adams' pocket? Son paid that? I mean, who do you pay? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I wish I could hear the lyrics better. I'm gonna get a better video of that and break down the lyrics of what he said, because I think that should be noted, because I was told that Eric Adams anti-violence. I heard a lot of things in there that didn't sound too anti-violence to me. But I could see now why the Chinese Communist Party hires him now. I could see, so very talented. I could see. I would think that maybe it would be on Hot 97 or Source Magazine would do a write-up, or you'd hear him on the radio. But no, he's booking gigs with the Chinese Communist Party. Oh, weird. I wonder if he's ever been to Turkey, if he's ever rapped for anybody in Turkey. I think so.
To me, this party seems like an upgrade. I mean, first, how do you even schedule a party there? And I love the fact he says he's paying for it. Like, how do you pay for it? Listen, if this administration wasn't riddled with appearance of impropriety and numerous aspects of corruption, and they had a one-time party, maybe it was inclusive where they, invite people off the street to come, view the party, that'd be something different. But with this administration, everything has appearance of corruption. Everything has a potential appearance of like, where's that money going? And again, who you paying for this? That's what I want to. Who's actually getting paid? Tom, shout out to you, Coffee and Donuts. What happened to the fake vaccine card investigation? Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. That kind of came and went real quick, and that didn't last. John,
you don't know what happened with those?
Well, you know what, John? Do you think there was ever actually a fake vaccine card investigation? That's the question.
No, there was. They listen. That was a very vital investigation for this administration, because they needed to determine who actually has low integrity, so they know who they could promote and surround themselves with. So, although the fake vaccine card investigation was a big investigation, because literally, look what happened to those people: 0, and then they got promoted or got transferred to higher units. So they needed to weed out the people with actual integrity, and they needed the people with low integrity. Like, oh, you lied to us? Don't worry about it. Good job. Good job. You're one of the boys. You broke your cherry. You popped your cherry. That was like the scene in Goodfellas when they all come out and they gives Henry Hill the money. Learn the 2 greatest lessons in life. Always keep your mouth shut, never rat on your friends, right? And that's the problem today in New York City. The problem is Goodfellas has infected a lot of these people's minds, and they're not able to tell. Like, I think it was either you or Sal posted something yesterday. I was busy. I wasn't really near my phone yesterday, but I saw a response to it that I wanted to respond to, and I never got time to. And the response was, whatever happened to Omerta? And it was a retired cop. And I wanted to light him up, and I just never got a chance to, because I'm like, when did you sign and swear an oath to Omerta? I swore an oath before God to the United States Constitution. I did not swear an oath that I wasn't going to tell about dirty cops. Did you swear that oath? Is that what you think you swore an oath to? Do you think you swore an oath to do that? Because I didn't think that. I know you didn't think that. I know a lot of us didn't think that. And, all the rat talk, I love it, because it shows me exactly who the rats are. Oh, you're a rat. You're a rat. You're a rat. Okay, I'll wear that with a badge on. I'll get a rat tattoo right on my chest, right? If that means that I'm not one of you, you could label me as that. I'll take that all day. I'll take that from the time of my birth to the time of my death. If that means I'm not a dirty wannabe skell like you people, I'll take it all day. Just like I told the kids in the gym when I became a cop, and they're like, "Oh, you became a pig? It's better than being a fake tough guy." And it's the same thing now. You want to call us rats for pointing out the corruption? I'll take that all day, because it's better than being a fake gangster, because that's what you are. You couldn't even be real criminals. You had to go get a gun and a badge and misuse your authority to try to hide behind it. You're fake gangsters. I'll take rat all day.
All right, dude, I agree with you. Absolutely. You're a fake gangster, fake tough guy, phony tough guy. I'd rather be a real person than be something fake. Swear Omerta. You swear Omerta to these people who wouldn't stick up for you in a second. Look, Look, while Jeffrey Madre ran out the door, you don't hear a word from John Shell. You don't hear a word from Kaz Daughtry. He brought Kaz Daughtry up. He promoted him by rocket fuel. You don't see him saying a word. You know what I'm curious about before we get to the Daniel Penny effect and segue out? You know what I'm curious about, John? How many cops were working? Were there cops? Was there a detail assigned to that party? I'm sure there were. I would put my money on it. How much taxpayer money was, he's claiming he paid for it, but I'm sure cops were working their detail, uniformed or not. I'm sure there was personnel working, or maybe his security detail working. The taxpayer money working that party. Tom, shout out to you. Another one. We appreciate it, brother. $1.99, more coffee and donuts. How many chief of department, chief of patrol cops had those fake cards? Yeah, I would like to know. How many of those had fake cards? How many actually were discovered, and how many were not disciplined because they fall into tier number 1, which is nepotism along with the upper echelon? Yes, absolutely. John, let's segue into this. I think this is great. Let's do it.
I think just before we segue into this, I think the other thing that needs to be pointed out in all these trials and all these court cases suing over the mandate is there were people in the chief of department's office and the chief of patrol's office that actually did fall into that window and never took it, and they were never disciplined. They were never terminated, like Marlon Bethel. Nothing ever happened to them. So that also goes to show you there's different tiers, It goes to show you. So yeah, the Daniel Penny effect. I feel like I heard that somewhere before. But shout out to Fox News for finally starting to try to report some type of news. So they had Jordan Peterson on it. So I'm laughing because I like Jordan Peterson. I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. I read all his books. I'm currently in the process of reading He Who Wrestles with God, or We Who Wrestle with God, whatever the title of it is. I'm currently in the process of reading that book. But I just think it's so funny, like that. I'm just gonna play the video because I just think it's so funny, because this is what basically every cop and every retired cop has been screaming for the last 12 years. And then Jordan Peterson says it, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." So let's just play the video, and then let's just get into it, because I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's what we need a psychologist to break it down to America and to break it down like to what's going on, when it's the same thing we've been saying for 12 years, all of us, not just this podcast, everybody." And it's more than just the Daniel Penny effect. But here you go.
But let's talk about the left for a second, because you have Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, who continues to overcharge people like Daniel Penny, who thankfully was acquitted, while undercharging, not charging at all, or letting violent criminals out of jail so they can then go victimize others. But then they say this on Twitter and elsewhere in other media. They say things like, this is from Bragg: New Yorkers rely on public transportation and our transit system, and they should be safe. It should be a safe environment for all Manhattanites. This year, we've continued to prosecute those who jeopardize the safety of its commuters, riders, and workers. So after there's consequences for their policies, they then turn around and say that they're doing everything they can to keep people safe, when it's clearly not true.
That seems to me to be perfectly reasonable. That's what happens when you treat criminals like they're victims. Now, the right tends to call for longer jail sentences, and that's not necessarily effective, but probability of being caught is very effective. Criminals are rational actors by and large, and they take risk into effect, as we've seen in California with the waves of shoplifting emerging after the Californian government so foolishly decided that any shoplifting under $1,000 wouldn't be prosecuted. Well, anybody with a criminal bent is going to feel that's a field day. Mm-hmm. So the best thing that governments could do is increase the probability that criminals will actually suffer the consequences of their actions and stop treating them as if they're victims. The victim idea with regards to criminality is unbelievably naive. Most, especially repeat offenders. So it's 1% of criminals commit 65% of the crimes. And it's been known among people who understand penological theory for decades that the best thing you can do with a repeat offender is to lock them up essentially until they're in their late 20s, when they often more or less mature out of their criminality.
Yeah.
But to feel sorry for them, you're just a fool.
So he put it a lot more eloquently than me and you. But I mean, I think this is what every police person, anyone that's familiar with the criminal justice system, been saying for 12 years.
Listen, dude, honestly, this is pretty much the base of the podcast. What we've been saying is a criminal first society. We turn criminals into victims. We victimize them. Oh, they had a rough economic life, or, we can't. What do we hear from the left? We can't arrest our way out of it. We've been saying the complete opposite. You need intrusive police work, and we need to make arrests. And arrests hold people accountable. And he said it right here. He said it that even criminals have a sense of risk. They're aware of the risks, and they take those risks depending on their ability to evade the police or get apprehended. So if people understand that you could potentially get apprehended and face justice, that deters them. That's a risk that they're not necessarily willing to face. We've been saying this for a long time, absolutely. But they hear from Jordan Peterson, it holds more weight than just some flunky cops.
No, dude, yeah, it's wild. And then I love how they're using the Daniel Penny effect. I love how that is. I love how the word egregious has been out in the media all over the place now. I love the effect of, I love the finest unfiltered effect on the media. That's what I love the most about it. It's so funny, dude. Yeah. So it's like, but again, what are we doing about it? Like, what exactly are we going to do about it? You have a governor who is allowing district attorneys to go rogue and act as if they're social workers and act as if they're the political beheaders of people in society, against anyone that is in opposition of what their own politics is. Notably Alvin Bragg, right? Letting him roam free. Eric Adams, what did Eric Adams say? Me and Alvin Bragg are one and the same. Our theory on public safety is one and the same. What's he doing about it? Ultimately, what are we going to do to fix the problem? And again, the crime, all of the problems that are being faced in New York City right now are politically created, right? Immigration, we let the borders run wild. We let criminals in. Now we have criminals who we don't know who they are, where they're unidentified, running around committing more crime on New York City streets. Political failure. You have criminals that have either here or not been here that are identified, that are running wild, and there's zero accountability for their actions. Why? Political ramifications of the way you vote, because of the DAs you put in, the politicians you elect, the city council people who make the laws and remove the laws, and everything you see is a result of politics. Then you have millions in taxpayer fund going for these services instead of going by way of prosecution, and they're gone. Money's gone. Why? Because the people you put in place, the people that fund these organizations, aren't holding those organizations accountable. So the whole thing is a political failure. And again, I just see the love from conservatives for Richie Torres. And it's like, this dude, like, you forget that for 2-3 years, this guy was saying, let's defund the NYPD. I don't want more police. I want less police. I wanted to fund the NYPD. More police isn't the answer. And, I called him out on Elon Musk is tweeting about him. I called him out about it, and he blocked me just because I shared a video. I didn't say anything rude. I said, how come you have not backpedaled on your stance about defund the police? And he blocked me. He's elected official. He's not allowed to. So I will be filing a complaint against him as well, just like I did on Kaban. And she rescinded and unblocked, and I'll be filing a complaint on Richie Torres. But this is your front runner for governor. He can't answer a question. He blocks constituents. He's a congressperson. He's a former New York City council person. Can't defend his stances. It's easy. I asked a question. You could just say, hey, well, I know better now. I changed my mind. But just like Jordan Peterson says there, criminals said, everyone said when California said we're no longer going to prosecute people who steal under $1,000. Guess what happened? Retail theft went through the roof. Shocker. And it's the same thing with Richie Torres. You're going to vote this guy in for governor, the guy who wanted less prosecution, the guy who wanted less police, and now you're going to bring this guy in because he's saying the right thing about public safety? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, it's become a theme with politicians that they want to control the narrative and they won't handle any questions. That should be the base of your position in politics, is asking questions for the public and learning and understanding how to serve them. What are your needs? What are your concerns? If I mean, listen, he hasn't even been elected yet. He hasn't even run yet, and he's already blocked you for asking one simple question. So if that's not a reflective of what it's going to be like in his tenure, if he gets elected for tenure, if he gets elected mayor or governor, it looks like he's vying for a governor spot. He can't even handle opposition of social media. How would he handle controversy, something controversial in public? Complete loser. Listen, if I was in New York, he would not get my vote. He was all about to fund the NYPD, and now all of a sudden he's another MAGA guy. And the tides had turned. These politicians, they're playing a game, and we're not playing it. I'm tired of playing this game with them. We have to speak up and about the atrocities. We need people that serve the public and not serve themselves.
No, absolutely. And so, I was at a party this weekend, and a lot of people like, oh, I like Richie Torres. And I was like, that's because you watch Fox News and you read the New York Post, and they're pushing Richie Torres, and now you believe everything that Elon Musk says is correct. I was like, that's what they do. They keep you in the Overton window, and then the people that are feeding you that this is a great guy aren't actually telling you the facts from 2 weeks ago. So the guy could flip-flop and you like him. I'm like, the guy's a complete loser. I'm like, if you vote for him, New York City will be worse. I'd rather have Hochland than him. Here's Richie Torres. Here's just one example. I mean, there are thousands of examples. This comes in from our good friend Scooch. There are literally hundreds of statements about this dude. If you don't remember what Ed Mullins said about Richie Torres, I believe he was dead accurate about it. I'll just put it this way. It rhymed with runt. And I believe he was right. And Richie's probably a runt too. So this is Richie Torres. This is the front runner for governor in New York. It's either him or the congressperson Mike Lawler from Long Island, who touts himself as the most bipartisan Republican member of Congress. Not a good thing, Mike. Not a good thing, especially the last 4 years when the Democrats went so far left. It's not even funny. You aligning with them is not a bragging point. So these are our two front runners for governor. Two weak, soft, inept, cowardly, in my opinion, both leftists, far left leftists. Both of them. I don't care that Mike Lawler has an R in front of his name. He's attempting to outlaw parts of the New Testament. If Mike Lawler and this guy are your best bet in New York, New York's done. It's done. So call it a wrap. Everybody who has a pension, get a job, because that thing's going to be gone.
Do you support defund the police as a movement?
I do, and the city council supports. We put forward a proposal for defunding the NYPD by $1 billion. A few months ago, the mayor put forward a budget that eviscerated youth services by 1/3, while only cutting the NYPD's budget by 1/3 of 1%. And we in the city council said that is a non-starter. That's unacceptable to us. There needs to be a radical redistribution of resources from policing into social services and community-based alternatives to overcriminalization.
Is the tone of people saying that you're not to be trusted or you're a liar, is that based on, what is that based on, in your opinion? Do you support defund the police?
I didn't even catch that part. I gotta watch this whole interview. That is hysterical.
That's
you're
hilarious.
A liar.
even he called him out, right?
Yeah.
Basically, you're a liar. Like, how do what do you have to say about that? That's basically what he said.
He was like Hillary with the hot sauce. I always bring hot sauce when I come.
I don't know how anybody can support this guy, but again, he's another guy that took the opportunity when Trump being president-elect to start to move to this MAGA type position, and he wants to vie for a governor position. There's no doubt about it. And if anybody votes this guy, you're getting Kathy Hochul, maybe even worse. Maybe even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, screw Richie Torres. Anything you want to get on before we get out of here? I think we got a lot for today.
Let people go and listen. It's right after Christmas. I'm sure some people have to go return some items that they received, some gifts, whatever the case is. We're getting ready for the new year. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back Monday. Monday's the 30th, right? And then I guess we'll figure out what we're going to do around New Year's. We'll keep you posted. So thank you so much. Listen, keep your finger on the pulse. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid of the trolls. These people are losers. They got nothing better to do. If they're calling you a loser, just remember they're watching you. So shout out to my friends that listen on podcasts. I hope you had an awesome Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Let's get ready for the new year. Thank you so much for building this network together. Let's keep building.
Yeah, no, check out Bryant Park, the Christmas Village. I heard it's fire this year. So that's what you got up on the screen. Check that out. And closing video, let's see. There's a guy not too fond of the podcast. He says that we're not original. Nobody likes it. He actually worked. He didn't work for me in the 6-6, but he worked with me. And he's not a fan of the podcast. So I just want to give him a shout out before we go. I think we got a nice video of him, and we're going to end. It's going to be a video of him, video into, our same, what we always do. The Daughtry, the Kaz Daughtry video of him talking crap about us. Crap, I don't remember what I did with it. Hold on, give me 2 seconds, Eric, before we go.
And you see one of the trolls here, Labro, which is funny. I'm giving you a little too much airtime, but I think it's funny. That's the theme of this police department, right? Because completely Labro's on duty and saying that we need to shrink, that we need to be in straitjackets. That's the theme. They try to slander you. So keep on talking, keep on pushing.
So this guy's not a fan of the podcast at all. It's just Charlie on the Parkway. We still love you, Charlie. So I just want to let you know, scratch us off your list. But this is Charlie on the Parkway. Guys, we'll be back Monday, live, 8:05. New topics. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff that we didn't get to that happened over the weekend. And like we said, there's going to be a lot more coming out in this corruption scandal. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So
shout out to you, Charlie.
Charlie, thanks for watching, brother. Appreciate you. All right, guys.
Thanks for being a fan.
Thanks for being a fan. All right, guys. We'll see you Monday.
Oh, hi, I'm Charlie on the Parkway. If I see you driving my way, I want to see you drive the safe way. We're in Ocean Parkway, northbound and southbound. You cannot make any turns, especially right turns, at Beverly Road. This is the same sequence as Avenue C, Avenue J, and Avenue P as in Peter in the 6-6. You cannot make a right turn. Reason being, you have a green light on Ocean Parkway. Now, so does the service road. And in between is the bicycle path and the pedestrian path. So no more right turns at Beverly Road. Make a right turn at Cortellia, not at C, not at Beverly, and not at Church. Remember, I'm Charlie in the Parkway. If I see you driving my way, I want to see you drive the safe way. No right turns.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888-901 Blue. That's 888-901 Blue.